Chapter 1875. At that time, the Burning Legion was wantonly coming out of Azhara through the portal opened by Du, burning and destroying all over the world. Before the collapse of the ancient Kalimdor continent, the location of the Dragon Sleep Temple was quite close to the center of the continent. The shape of the broken Noscent continent on the map looked like a kidney. The Dragonbone Wilderness where the Dragon Sleep Temple was located in the middle of the kidney, near the southern part. In addition, the dragons were the vanguard of the anti-demons, so it was normal for the Dragon Sleep Temple to be invaded by demons. On this day, the demons once again attacked the Dragon Sleep Temple. Duque, who was lurking in the front line, saw with his own eyes the dragons guarding the temple encounter the first wave of demons. It was a group of Doomwalkers and Doomguards. The huge wings gave the Doomguards and other demons extraordinary flying ability, and they rushed straight to the Dragon Sleep Temple. However, they were immediately attacked, with all kinds of dragons entangling them. The blazing breath made them no longer pay attention to the Dragon Sleep Temple. The green dragons used poisonous breath, and even worse, their ability to control nightmares. At least, Duque and the others saw with their own eyes two high-grade demons suddenly scream and run away without warning, as if some indescribable horror was chasing them. Du-Mok wondered maliciously if the one chasing them was Kwafu. Kwafu chasing the sun. Chasing the sun, isn't that scary? Yes. The battle in the sky was very exciting. The 5 colored dragons worked together to attack from the front and back. The blue dragons used their ice magic to slow down the enemy or directly freeze them, while the red dragons used flames to deal with the demons with lower magic resistance, and the black dragons, with the acceleration ability given by the bronze dragons, used their more powerful melee ability to kill and tear the demons to pieces. The 5 colored dragons worked together to fight, and the opponents were outnumbered. Almost every 5 dragons of different colors formed a group, working together to deal with a small group of demons that did not exceed 2 digits. They cooperated well, and often the attacks that the enemies thought could cause damage were just like fireflies flying into a flame. But the endless demons did indeed attract the attention of the guardians of the Dragon Slumber Shrine. No one noticed that a blue dragon swaggered into the temple. Well, he was also carrying a blue dragon who was covered in blood and half dead. "My brother is injured. Is there anyone from the red dragon race who can help save him?" The blue dragon shouted in Draconic. The other temple guards glanced at him and sighed. "We can't save him unless an ancient dragon comes to help." The blue dragon had a look of despair. The hierarchy in the Dragon Slumber Shrine was actually quite strict. The guardian dragons were naturally the highest, and the ones below them were ranked according to their age. Naturally, they were ancient dragons, adult dragons, infant dragons. Below the pure-blooded dragons were the draconians who were more like dragons, and at the very bottom were the draconians. Now that they were at war with the Burning Legion, the red dragons, who were in charge of life, were too busy trying to save the other 4 giant dragons. Where would he find the extra mana to save a lowly draconian? Returning to the embrace of nature and dying in Dragonbone Wasteland was the greatest gift to these subsidiary races. Sure enough, the injured blue dragon breathed his last after a while. The blue draconid who carried him in was grief-stricken, and soon got up to tell the draconid guarding the middle gate. "My brother has a top-secret report for His Majesty Malygos." That was the information he had exchanged with his life. "I request to meet His Majesty in person." The draconid was a little puzzled. "You are..." The blue dragon introduced himself. "My name is Dog Shit." "Oh, my primordial dragon language isn't very good." "Malygos, is it? I couldn't tell that your father was a pure-blooded primordial dragon. How did you just mutate?" The draconid sighed. The blue dragon made a gesture of wiping his nose in embarrassment. There were a total of 8 draconids guarding the gate, and one of them nodded. "Wait here. I will rule an primordial dragon. But I don't know if the lord on duty will convey it to His Majesty." With that, the draconid opened a small teleportation gate and went in. After a while, he came out again. "Come this way, Malygos." The blue dragon bared his teeth, feeling that he had been too smart for his own good. The draconid led him into a subspace, through a long spatial corridor, and to a side hall. It was a huge gate that was a full 100 meters tall, with 2 elegant and beautiful adult blue dragons coiled at the gate. The 2 blue dragons opened one eye at the same time and glanced at the Draconid and the blue dragon. The gate was magnificently decorated, with a huge blue dragon sculpture of Malygos, the king of magic. When the Draconid approached on 4 legs, the gate disappeared without a sound. When the Draconid and the Draconid passed through the gate, the blue magic runes on the door frame of the side hall flickered. Those typical Titan runes cast a mysterious light that swept over their bodies. Seeing that the gate didn't respond, the 2 adult blue dragons closed their eyes and continued to pretend to sleep. Entering the side hall, at the bottom of the gorgeous platform that was filled with all kinds of Titan runes and magic screens, a beautiful and elegant blue dragon appeared in front of the 2 entrants. She had crystal-clear blue scales like sapphires, extremely elegant and streamlined body curves, and, before the blue dragon who was craning his neck could see clearly, the massive blue dragon had already cast ultimate transfiguration and turned into a dark elf with blue hair. She had the typical appearance of a night elf, dark green skin and long pointed ears. She seemed to hate facial lines, so she didn't have them. Instead, she wore a set of leather armor with a V-shaped chest. "I'm Telegosa. You don't have to be so tired to talk like this. Okay, I'm short on time. I hope your information is as important as you say. Otherwise, you know the rules of the Blue Dragon Army." I know. The Blue Dragon nodded submissively. Then, after the Draconid walked away, he leaned in front of Telegosa and whispered, "My dead brother Kadagos accidentally heard a black dragon say that Nisario was preparing to use the dragon soul to make a trap and snatch the power that originally belonged to the 4 dragon kings." When the blue dragon said this, Telegosa's entire the entire dragon's aura changed. In less than 1/10 of a second, the former elf once again turned into a huge dragon. She let out a deafening roar. "You're not a Draconid of the Blue Dragon Army." "Who?" With a roar, her huge claws slammed down. Perhaps she just wanted to capture this guy who pretended to be a blue dragon and ask him what was going on. When her claws slammed down, her strength was even a little bit slower. However, as soon as her claws touched the Blue Dragon Man, the Blue Dragon Man actually fell apart. Chapter 1876. No, to be precise, he turned into a cloud of shadow energy that dragons hated the most, and dissipated with a whoosh. When his figure once again gathered into a whole body, he was already at the door on the other side of the temple. Demon? Be it Tyragosa or the other blue dragons monitoring and dispatching in the side temple, they were all stunned. At this point in time, the first non-Eridan warlock to use demonic power in the universe had yet to be born, and there were no demon hunters or death knights. It could be said that those who used shadow energy were all demons. There were thousands of demons in the Legion, and aside from the famous warring races of Eridan, there were always some strange demons that the dragons did not recognize. In fact, it was impossible to recognize all of them. The Burning Legion had destroyed thousands of planets, and there were many who thirsted for power who were willing to become vassal races, or even dead leftovers like a few kittens. In any case, the Azeroth creatures had determined that those who used dark and shadow energy were enemies, and there was no escaping. "Kill him." Tyragosa pushed off the ground with all 4 limbs and spread her wings, leaping high into the air. She accelerated in midair and pounced at the strange blue dragon person. Beside her, there were also 2 adult blue dragons that reacted and pounced forward. They were extremely resentful. This was a great humiliation. Allowing the evil demon to cross 5 or 6 layers of defense and sneak into the core area of the Dragon Sleep Temple. Be it the patrols outside, the dragon people guarding the periphery of the temple, the draconians guarding the main door, the adult dragons at the door of the side temple, or even the runic protection circle of the Titans, none of them noticed anything amiss. If not for Tyragosa's vigilance, the demon might have even made its way to His Majesty Malygos, and that would have been a nightmare. Unexpected things happened again and again. Originally, the blue dragons thought that this demon, who was disguising himself as a blue dragon person, was going to assassinate Malygos. Taragosa was thinking about how to stop him from killing his way into the Dragon Slumber Temple's main hall of the King of Magic. Who knew that the other party would play a little magic? It was a vivid illusion. When she and a few other blue dragons rushed over, they were shocked to find that they had been tricked, and the real enemy had rushed in the opposite direction. When they chased after it again, the other party actually used the magic gate of the Dragon Sleep Temple. As Telegosa rushed through a door she had passed through thousands of times, she was suddenly struck by a violent electric shock. Tens of thousands of volts of ultra-high voltage electricity hit her hard. Although her strong magic resistance offset most of the damage, the electric current that spread all over her body still knocked her down. The unlucky blue dragons at the back started foaming at the mouth and fainted on the ground. Zzz, zzz, zzz. At this time, the entire Dragon Slumber Shrine rang with the alarm of an intruder. In a large hall in the core area of the temple, two ancient red dragons raised their heads vigilantly. After half a second to confirm that it was an emergency alarm that signified that the enemy had infiltrated the temple, they immediately entered combat mode. Go and ask what's going on? The ancient red dragon called Reloraz immediately asked through the magic mirror. After receiving a reply, he turned his snake-like neck. There's trouble at the blue dragon's side. A shape-shifting demon disguised as a blue dragon entered the core zone. No one knows what that demon wants to do, but we have to be on high alert before that demon is destroyed and proves that the Dragon Sleep Temple is safe again. At this moment, the majestic doors of the hall opened with a bang. The one standing at the gate was a blue dragon that looked very small. Careful. Enemy attack. Without another word, the two ancient red dragons immediately unleashed their dragon breaths. Something that left them utterly shocked happened. The other party clearly understood the red dragon's attack patterns very well. Just as they took a deep breath and prepared to unleash their dragon breaths, the blue dragon had already begun to charge. As the two dragon breaths intersected and shot towards them from the left and right, the strange blue dragon leaped high into the air. The giant dragon was certain that that wasn't a blue dragon's movement, it was too light and graceful. He did a front somersault 3,650 degrees in the air, and his tiny body actually seemed to be riding the wind and breaking the waves. Stepping on the rising fire elements, he flew straight towards the center of the hall, where a silver disc was enshrined on a small platform. Not good. Stop him. One of the giant dragons swung its sharp claws, its dark red, sharp claws drawing a piercing gale. The other giant dragon swung its tail, and no one could imagine how the blue dragon was going to dodge that ridiculously wide area attack. Unexpectedly, the blue dragon person actually did an unscientific double jump. As if stepping on the flames of dragon breaths, he dodged the two giant dragons' physical attacks in an unscientific arc. At this moment, the only thing that could stop him was the Titan runic magic circle set up on the platform. The two of them were in despair. The Titan runic magic circle that they had high hopes for was supposed to be the nemesis of demonic creatures. The power of that magic circle was so great that its first attack alone could definitely knock down a mid-tier Void Lord. However, nothing happened. The Titan runic magic circle flickered and shone with a gentle blue light. That was the light that recognized the blue dragon as an ally who was allowed to enter. Impossible! The two giant dragons exclaimed in shock. There was no justice in this world. Just like that, the blue dragon got the platinum disc as if he was performing acrobatics. Time seemed to be completely frozen at this moment by something called fear. Bye-bye. The blue dragon made a gesture of waving goodbye and revealed a human-like smile. Naturally, such a smile was a complete mockery to the two ancient dragons. Without giving them time to react, the blue dragon immediately activated Flash. In the world of Azeroth 10,000 years later, any mage could use this move. But at this time and place, this move had scared away the souls of the two ancient red dragons. Magic was not common in this world, and only the dragons and the high elves truly mastered magic. However, there were many magic restrictions in the Dragon Sleep Temple, which were high-end things on the level of the Titan runic magic circle. Apart from existences on the level of the ancient blue dragon, no other giant dragon could use it at all. Under the double suppression of the Dragon Sleep Temple's spatial restriction and magic restriction, even the strongest of the dragon race could only use the most basic melee and dragon breath. This guy who looked like a blue dragon was really going to ascend to the heavens. However, this guy treated the Dragon Sleep Temple as his own backyard and was very familiar with it. The group of giant dragons chased him for 2 circles before losing him. After hearing the news, the 5 great dragon aspects were both shocked and furious. Traitor! There must be a traitor! Malygos was almost mad because the other party had perfectly broken the magic restriction that he had personally set up. This was like slapping his dragon face with a slipper. What did we lose? Alexstrasza asked coldly. A platinum disc that was prepared to be used to make the dragon soul. At this moment, the Earth Guardian dragon, Nisario, looked unnatural. Chapter 1877. For a moment, Telegos's heart went cold. As one of the ancient dragons, she certainly knew about the top-secret plan of the Dragon Slumber Temple. In theory, there were quite a few dragons who knew that the 5 dragon aspects were going to use the Dragon Soul to create a dragon power nuclear bomb. It was precisely because their conventional combat power was insufficient and the losses were too great that they had to make a big killing weapon to blast the demons. Nisario had informed the Dragon Kings in advance that they had to inject a considerable amount of power for it to be effective. After that, the Dragon Kings would be in a weak state for a long time, so it was necessary to protect them. When the Dragon Kings were doing things, the ancient dragons would naturally help to watch the scene. At this point in time, there were at least 50 ancient dragons of each color who knew about this. Malygos scolded a traitor, but he really did not know how to deal with it. Alexstrasza also felt a headache. Now that a great enemy was in front of them, it was time for the Pentashade dragons to unite. If they really interrogated as Malygos did, it would definitely cause a serious crack in the unity of the Pentashade dragons. Wait, Malygos, before dealing with the so-called traitors and derelicts, shouldn't we first determine the losses? Yes, that should be the case. Being asked by Big Sister, Malygos finally recovered from his state of anger. Is it really just a platinum disc? The Red Dragon Queen asked worriedly. To be precise, because of the invasion of unknown demons, we need to replace most of the temple's magical protection system. At the very least, all the password techniques have to be reset. No one wants a powerful demon to come in and cut off our heads while we're asleep, right? Malygos added. Alexstrasza turned to look at the Black Dragon King. Can we make another platinum disc that was prepared to be used as that thing? Nisario's dragon heart was thumping rapidly. Under the gaze of all the Dragon Kings, he could only show an indifferent expression. Although it's a little troublesome, my answer is that of course it can be done. Before we inject the Titan divine power of the 5 Dragon Kings, that thing is just a tough enough carrier. Then make another one. The Red Dragon Queen decided. This time, brother, after you make another one, I want to personally guard this thing. Malygos took on everything. All right, as long as you like it. Nisario seemed a little helpless. At the same time, on the peak of the snowy mountain where the Ice-Crown Fortress would be built 10,000 years later, Queen Sylvie and Sal finally saw Duque. You succeeded? When the two of them saw the smile on Duque's face, they already had a rough idea of what was going on. They were just making a final confirmation. Duque smirked and took out the platinum disc from his robe that was emitting a magical aura. Around the disc, there was a layer of faint arcane energy enveloping it. When I, your husband, set out, when have I ever failed? Duque chuckled. Then, shall we go back now? Sal asked. Duque shook his head. We'll only mess things up if we bring it back. Then what's going on? Queen Sylvie frowned. He had to admit that even when his wife frowned, she was still so beautiful. Duque smirked. Do you know how the soul of the dragon became the soul of the demon? The two opposites shook their heads. Of course, someone as smart as Nisario wouldn't do anything after the 4 Dragon Kings injected the Titan divine power. He set the trap from the beginning. Just as Duque said, yesterday at this point in time. In the obsidian holy land of the Black Dragons. Nisario grimaced as he peered at the shrunken figure below, only to see that the guy's rising and falling chest was firmly clamped by the stone nails, but the little man completely ignored it as he struggled to get rid of the shackles. The tattered red and black robe and the gorgeous and dazzling fragments of golden armor hung scattered around his strangely shaped torso. He had 2 goat-like horns on his head, a deep red face, a wide mouth, and sharp teeth that resembled those of a dragon. The pair of purple-black eyes were like 2 dark abysses that wanted to engulf the guy who imprisoned him. Unfortunately, he definitely did not have the power to match the Black Dragon King's will. In addition to being nailed, the long-horned monster was also shackled by thick chains on the ground. These chains had been specially reinforced to fix his hands and feet to the stalagmite. The prisoner's mouth moved a few times from time to time, as if he was shouting something, but no sound came out. However, he didn't give up, especially when he saw the dragon approaching. Immediately, the prisoner's angry, shrill, and incessant curses rang out in the secret chamber. "My lord Sargeras will make the black dragons bleed like a river. He will make your skin into a trench coat and wear it. He will feed your flesh to the dogs. He will seal your soul in a bottle forever and torture it wantonly." Nesario blinked and used a spell to make his Void Lord prisoner lose the ability to speak again. In order to capture this mid-tier Void Lord, the Black Dragon King and his subordinates had put in a lot of effort. The Black Dragon King raised his big claw and focused. After a while, a golden light flashed in his palm. The light gradually became dazzling, and even the captured Void Lord stopped cursing and stared at what Nesario had summoned. The golden light was just a sign, and then a disc appeared, still shining with golden light. But surprisingly, its structure was unusually simple. Even the night elves could easily capture a small creature. The disc was like a large ordinary gold coin, wrapped in a round shell that shone brightly. This kind of unexpected design was all Nesario's idea. If he wanted this divine rune to complete its mission, it should be inconspicuous and frightening. He brought the platinum disc in front of the Void Lord to let the fanatical and powerful Eridar wizard see what was waiting for him. However, the Lord showed an indifferent expression. He glanced at the dragon and the disc from head to toe, his eyes full of mockery. Nesario looked at his reaction. The Eridar Lord did not notice the powerful magic in the platinum disc. He was very satisfied because even the most cunning demon lord could not see anything, which meant that the other dragons would not be able to see anything until they could not turn back and it was too late for regrets. The Earth Guardian dragon flicked its claws, and the disc emitted a golden light that illuminated the demon's forehead. In an instant, a ray of red light dyed his face red. Then, a mysterious rune jumped out of the platinum-colored disc and entered his body with a whoosh. The Black Dragon King opened his terrifying mouth full of fangs and spoke in a language that could not be heard in the mortal world. Every word was filled with the strongest evil aura, and even the demon shuddered. Chapter 1878. As the Lord of Eridar who had destroyed countless worlds, this was the strangest sound he had ever heard. It was like a perfect piece of music, but also like the whisper of the most beautiful female in the dead of night. It was the language of the gods. As Nesario spoke, the platinum-colored disc began to shine again. The mysterious glazed light shrouded the huge secret chamber, and it became more and more dazzling with every syllable the Black Dragon King uttered. The simple outer shell of the disc could not conceal the brilliance of the divine runes inside. The Lord of Eridar involuntarily opened his mouth to the limit due to the severe pain. A silent cry brewed in his throat, and blood flowed out of his horrified eyes. It was a mixture of blood and tears. His entire body arched backward, and his blue tail slapped the rocks frantically. He was known as a demon in many worlds, but now he was tearing at the mysterious metal chain that bound him as if he was possessed. He used so much force that he even tore off the flesh on his wrists and ankles, causing them to bleed profusely. This was not an escape, but a purely painful struggle. Soon his skin, muscles, and even bones began to rot. Everything that could be called living tissue fell off his body inch by inch, and finally, like weathered stones, they cracked under the strong wind and fell piece by piece. Even so, his soul was still screaming and wailing. He was not afraid of death, for death could allow his soul to return to the distorted void. However, this kind of evil divine spell that completely absorbed the soul was his true nemesis. Not only was his life withering, but even his soul was distorted into another kind of existence. This even made it impossible for him to activate the death sequence in the distorted void. If the distorted void confirmed his death, it would separate a mass of soul-nourishing substance to nurture his soul and make up for the defects of his soul as much as possible on account of his status as a lord. Now, he was just missing, the evil divine light disappeared, and the runic metal chain that bound the demon lord moments ago was still swaying in the air. The Black Dragon King was like a loving father to his beloved son. He used his 2 claws to gently pinch a rune that emitted gentle waves from the skull, and then recited an incantation, embedding the rune back into the platinum disc. However, Nesario did not know that every detail of this scene had been seen by someone. When Dubois reproduced this scene in front of Queen Sylvie and Sal, both of them were completely shocked, speechless. Sal was finally convinced. How did you get the surveillance footage and sound of Nesario in the most secret room? Queen Sylvie also spread her hands. I'm not guessing anymore. Let's just reveal the mystery. Duque's smile was a little mischievous. The Obsidian Holy Land is the holy land of the Black Dragons. 10,000 years ago, this was the absolute territory of Nesario. There is no doubt about that. But 10,000 years later, the owner of the Obsidian Holy Land is Onyxia. Queen Shi and Sal understood immediately. At this point in time, no matter how sinister Nesario was, he would never have thought that his daughter, whom he had casually created, would occupy his lair 10,000 years later. Furthermore, she had sold her integrity, dedicated her body and mind, and given everything to Duque. Since Duque wanted to come back and cause trouble in the ancient war 10,000 years ago, he would definitely not let go of these details that could determine the success or failure of the entire operation. Before returning, Duque had confirmed with the Black Dragon all the restrictions, magic defense systems, and surveillance systems in the Obsidian Holy Land. Duque smiled and said, I once thought, why can't the Dragon Sleeping Temple remake Soul of the Dragon? The answer is obvious. That's because the Soul of the Dragon was personally created by Nesario. To be precise, he created it with Zatha's evil divine arts. Almost from the beginning, the Soul of the Dragon didn't exist. From beginning to end, there was only the soul of the demon. Sal continued Duque's train of thought. We can't just take the soul of the demon back like this, because this thing itself has serious flaws. Queen Sylvie's eyes also lit up. Or rather, the soul of the Void Lord of Eridar that has been transformed and fused into the platinum disc is the biggest problem. We don't know what the consequences and changes will be when it passes through the space and time tunnel. Duque gently pressed his right hand on the platinum disc. Our task is very important. Seizing the disc is just the first step. We still have to remake the soul of the dragon at this point in time. Thus, remaking the soul of the dragon was the biggest reason why Duque spent so much effort to return to the ancient war. He could indeed return with the soul of the dragon after eliminating the Void Lord according to the original history. Alexstrasza and the other 4 dragon aspects, who worked hard to protect the world, would definitely not have any objections to this. But Duque didn't want that. It turned out that in history, Sal was able to sustain that output. Apart from the fact that he was indeed awesome, the original design of the Soul of the Dragon was secretly beneficial to the Earth Guardian. When the 4 dragon aspects fully injected their own and the power given to them by the Titans, Nesario pretended to input his power. His clumsy performance definitely couldn't fool the Dragon Kings other than Nosdorm. The biggest key here was that Nesario had secretly retrieved his power and set up a temporary storage space so that he could retrieve his power when the other 4 Dragon Kings were not paying attention. The Soul of the Dragon was like a nuclear reactor. The power of the 4 Dragon Kings produced a reaction similar to nuclear fusion. Only Nesario's power was not added, so the effect was definitely inferior. Therefore, the Soul of the Dragon had a second layer of trap. That was, he should be able to use some method to forcibly extract more power from the 4 Dragon Kings who had already lost a lot of blood, and further widen the gap between them and Nesario. That was the foundation of the perfect betrayal of the wings of death. Duque believed that it was this double trap that was the core element of the four Dragon Kings' demise. Only by eliminating these two traps could the soul of the dragon achieve the goal of eliminating Nesario at this time of the cataclysm, and at the same time, preserve the vitality of all the Dragon Kings to the greatest extent. For this, he needed to secretly learn the production method. The best way was to watch Nesario create the soul of the dragon again. I don't care if you learned it from N'Zoth, or if you made it at N'Zoth's place. Now that the four Dragon Kings are after you, you won't have the chance to go back to some secret place to work. Dumuk sneered. Sure enough, as Duque expected, after Nesario returned to his lair, the Obsidian Holy Land, he flew into a rage in the secret room. Bastard! 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 Could it be a companion of the demon lord of Tupalas? A demon stealing a demon? What's the use of the soul of the dragon? Chapter 1879. At this point in time, Nesario was not that arrogant. He had indeed been driven crazy by N'Zotha's murmurs of the ancient gods, but he did not have the capital to be arrogant. In terms of fighting ability, there were at least 4 others who could fight as well as he could. Little Naizi's true uninhibited love of showing off had to start from his success in tricking his siblings and destroying the hot-headed Malaigos and his Blue Dragon Legion in one fell swoop. Now, he was just a scheming Dragon King. No matter how scheming he was, he would not have thought that the magic defense system of his lair had already been completely destroyed by Duque. Duque was also very cunning. He knew that Dragon Kings were very sensitive to things like spying. Not to mention malicious gazes, little Naizi, who now had a guilty conscience, would immediately give up on recasting the soul of the dragon at the slightest sign of trouble. What Duque used was passive sensing. He used the magic defense circle circuit of the Obsidian Holy Land to record the fluctuations caused by Nesario's every move in the secret room, and then recreated it in his mind with the system. Perception was a very mysterious thing to say. In fact, it was the same as the human body. When the wind blew, the hair and skin on the surface of the body would feel it. If there was a stove or an air conditioner around, it would still feel hot and cold. No matter how small the movements of such a huge black dragon were, it would still be earth-shaking in the ears of people. And as the earth aspect dragon, Nesario itself was a high-energy reactive body. As long as the surrounding magic defense system could receive all signals about the inside, it was no different from Duque standing next to little Naizi and watching him do it. Of course, at this moment, under the gaze of Queen Sylvanas and Thrall, Duque was just a strange person who was meditating like an old monk. Oh, it's starting. Is that so? And it's based on the Titan runic magic circle technique? I see. The characteristics of the other Dragon Kings were removed, and only the parts related to dragon were absorbed. A reaction furnace made with life, dream, time, and magic that seems to have 5 attributes, but in fact only 4? Is this the genius of N'Zoth or the genius of Nesario? Just like that, Duque muttered as if he was in a trance for a full 36 hours. It wouldn't take that long to create a simple soul of the dragon. The key was that Nesario needed to capture a strong enough backup demon. If it was just to steal power, there was no need for any demons. If he wanted the platinum disc that contained the power of the 4 dragon aspects to degenerate into an evil divine artifact, then it would be necessary. Nesario was in luck. After all, ever since Malaigos freaked out and said that he wanted to find the traitor, the Dragon Sleep Temple focused more attention on the Blue Dragon Legion. After all, it was the Blue Dragon's subordinate Draconians and Draconians who made the mistake, and it was also the Blue Dragon's fault that the magic defense system was broken. Big shots at or above the ancient giant dragon level generally believed that the other 4 colored giant dragons did not have that level of attainment in magic. After all, dragons preferred to use their bodies and talents rather than pursue magic at the expense of essentials. The Black Dragon army frequently attacked at the front lines, which was seen as a sign of responsibility. Although a few of Nesario's capable subordinates were a little confused, They still followed the boss's instructions and captured a beginner Void Lord at the cost of a moderately injured ancient giant dragon. Nesario repeated the steps in front of Duque as if he was teaching an experiment. Queen Sylvanas protected Duque, so that Duque could feel more at ease and turn on the system genie at full power, analyzing the role and reaction of each rune and divine incantation. Finally, 16 hours after Nesario's success, Duque let out a long sigh. "I know what to do." "What do you want us to do?" Duque turned to Sylvanas first. "First of all, your task is to isolate your aura. I want you to provide a complete aura shielding array for us to modify the soul of the demon at the location of the Ice Crown Fortress in the future without alarming the Dragonsleep Temple and Al-Akir." Queen Sylvanas frowned. "It's going to be quite a commotion, isn't it? Why does it have to be here?" "Because the real source of the magic ley line here is the Well of Eternity. Although the Well of Eternity has shut off the output of magic to the outside, it is actually only the main ley line that is closed. There are still some small magic tributaries that form the hidden magic ley line. I can't rebuild the magic net at this point in time during the Ancient War, so I can only use the ready-made ones." "What about me?" Sal asked. "Your task is more important. I will teach you how to modify the soul of the dragon. Take note, this thing is about as difficult as you using a tomahawk to operate on a mosquito. Although your failure will not cause any big explosion, I will have to forcibly snatch the soul of the dragon then. History will even change greatly because of this. At that time, Nosdorm at 2 points in time will definitely find trouble with us. I will try my best." Sal was quite calm. Duque looked up. "The last thing is the timing. We have to choose when the 5 Dragon Kings inject power into the soul of the dragon. Only then will the 5 Dragon Kings not have a chance to cause trouble." "Okay." The two responded in unison. The history of the ancient war seemed to be continuing according to what a certain someone was familiar with. The Burning Legion, which was endless and of incomparable quantity and quality, began to gain a greater advantage on the battlefield. While the 5 Dragon Kings were preparing to inject power into the soul of the dragon, Duque No. 1, who was playing Infernal Affairs, was busy having sex with Tyrant. And now, Duque No. 2 was setting up a backup plan. Finally, the historical moment arrived. A terrifying energy wave, just like history, came from the Dragonsleep Shrine. Even though they were far away, Duque and the other two could still clearly feel a huge force brewing. This naturally attracted the attack of the demon army. Tens of thousands of Terror Guardians and Doomsday Guards rushed towards the Dragonsleep Shrine. Bright lights and shadows flashed everywhere in the sky. Be it the demons or the giant dragons, they all fell down like dumplings. On the platform at the top of the Dragonsleep Shrine, Nesario, who was pretending to inject power, suddenly felt his heart palpitate. He exclaimed a name in his heart, Tupales. The name of that demon lord. The soul imprint that he had engraved in the demon's soul was erased. At this moment, in the deepest part of a huge ice cave that should have become the Ice Crown Fortress, Sal looked at Duque with some trepidation as he skillfully manipulated the power that should have belonged to the Burning Legion. The power of shadow seemed to be dancing on Duque's fingertips. Duque easily and perfectly dissected the demon's soul that had gone deep into the Platinum Disc Rune Magic Circle. Chapter 1880. Dumuk poured cold water on Sal's head and told him that there were only 2 beings on the entire planet who had the original Titan runes. One was the current Blue Dragon King, Kalegos, and the other was Duque. Without the permission of the Sleeping Dragon Temple, Duque wouldn't even let Sal see it. The 2 ancient dragons immediately agreed and flew towards the mountain where the Ice Crown Fortress would be located in the future with more than a dozen adult dragons and a group of young dragons. Of course, he longed to master this magical and sacred power, but Duque had no intention of teaching him. He was captured purely to work for him. This was the Ice Crown Fortress in the future. There were actually several caves leading from the snowy peak to the underground. Later, Nazul and Arthas, who became the Lich King, ordered the Cryptarachni to dig and reinforce the caves, eventually forming an underground passage connecting the Ice Crown Fortress and the northwest of the Dragonbone Wilderness. The entrance of the passage was the famous Gate of Divine Wrath in the future. Not only did Duque give the platinum disc to Sal, but he also snapped his fingers and directly projected a magnified projection of the platinum disc in midair. The two dragons approached the mountain cautiously, one in front and one behind. Queen Sylvanas immediately understood. When Nasristas approached the snowy peak, he was the first to find a problem. "Brother, did you notice that the elements here are a bit abnormal? That's also a relief for me. You will never imagine how insidious and vicious Nesario, who claims to be the guardian of justice and this world, is." This was simply venting. This Eridar demon vividly described the brutality and despicableness of the Black Dragon King. After a series of actions similar to a toothpick picking his teeth, Duque announced, "Okay, this thing is clean, it's up to you now." This amount of work had long exceeded the imagination of mortals. "Sal, you need to change the circuit here. Then, replace the Titan runes here, here, and here with these runes. Note, these are Titan runes. The smallest rune is made up of thousands of small runes that are constantly rotating. You need to use the power of the earth to replace these few key runes." Nasristas frowned. "It's a bit narrow here, send a young dragon to take a look first." After doing it continuously, Sal felt that he was very much like the old orc grandmother next door who specialized in sewing holes in his clothes and repairing his armor when he was a slave gladiator. Okay, what? He actually has Alexstras's dragon seal token? Forbid the Red Dragon clan from approaching that place? What made Sal grumble the most was still the Titan runes. Thrall and Queen, she looked at the soul that they should have loathed and hated. Before the explosion of the Well of Eternity, this place was a land of extreme cold. Pure white snow covered the Dragonbone wasteland and the surrounding mountains all year round. However, because Duque's modification of the Dragon Soul required him to gather the mana from the surrounding ley lines, the flow of mana naturally generated some heat. It was a very strange voice. It was coming from the soul of a Void Lord. "You're welcome. We're about to destroy you," Queen Sylvie said with a straight face. In fact, what Sal had to do was similar to carving flowers for a cake. Mixing flour, putting seasonings, throwing the oven to control the fire, and so on had nothing to do with him. It was just that Duque extracted the key Titan rune spells and asked him to replace them with a specific rune combination. "Duque, there's a situation." As the demigod of wind, Queen Sylvie was the first to sense the arrival of this strong scouting team long before the dragons discovered the three of them. "I've lived here for tens of thousands of years, and I didn't know there was a natural cave here." Although Duque had explained the key points to Sal early in the morning, and Sal himself had secretly practiced countless times these days, when it came to the real thing, Sal's forehead was still sweating. Now, what Duque wanted Sal to do was almost the same. "Nasristas, Vangastas, you two take your teams to the snowy peak in the northwest to take a look." For some reason, the magic circuit that should have dried up shows signs of gathering. Now that the Wyrmrest Temple is at its most critical moment, and the Dragon Kings can't move, we can't let go of any dangerous factors. If someone builds a large magic circle there to deal with us, it'll be bad. It doesn't seem like it. Those damned air elementals are quite irritable, and they don't know how to hide their tracks. They shouldn't be ordinary air elementals. No matter how Duque and Sal did their research, no matter how hard Queen Sylvie tried to hide her presence, the Wyrmrest Temple still detected it. Terranistas, this was a dragon who, after 10,000 years, because of self-blame and illness, and in order to seek justice for the Alliance, voluntarily died. After his death, his head was hung in the Iron Furnace Castle Adventurer Hall. At this point in time, he was still alive and well, and he was Alexstras's first assistant. "No matter who you are, and no matter what your intentions are, I want to thank you for getting me out of this damned thing," Lord Eridar's soul said. This heat melted the ice and snow on the mountain peak, revealing the mountain path to the underground cave where Duque and the others were. Sal also tried to secretly learn some tricks or something, but he found that he lacked something very important: the primitive Titan runes passed down by the Titans. After Duque and the others listened for a minute, Queen Sylvie gave Duque a look, and Duque casually destroyed this Eridar demon. The bitter Sal could only work. A dragon's claw print was like a human's fingerprint. Every claw print was unique. When the two primordial WMs in their human forms saw the dragon seal writ at the entrance of the underground cave that contained supreme life force, they were a little dumbfounded. Vangastas nodded. Yes. There seems to be more wind elementals, and less other elements. The Wyrmrest Temple's dragons really deserve to be called local dragons if they didn't have the ability to sense such a big change in the ley line. It didn't take long for the young dragon to return, bringing with it some strange news. Duque scanned it with his senses. It's okay, Plan A. For example, this was like stuffing a polar bear into a child's sock. Of course, it was impossible, but there were ways to get rid of it. For example, the whole bear could be burned in the incinerator, leaving only ashes. Then, according to a magical 1-1-1 formula, something could be added and stuffed in. While the 5 Dragon Kings focused on infusing energy, he was the temporary manager of the Wyrmrest Temple. Wind Elemental Realm? This was Sal's contribution to saving the world. If he didn't do it well, the tribe might be destroyed later. Sal couldn't ask for more. It was annihilation on the spiritual level. Perhaps this guy's remaining soul in the twisting nether could resurrect him. Unfortunately, because there were no soul fragments to return to the twisting nether, this guy didn't even know who killed his body. Chapter 1881. In the name of Alexstrasza, the guardian dragon of Azeroth appointed by the Titans of the Pantheon, I declare that this place is forbidden to the Pentashade dragons. Anyone who trespasses this place without the Dragon Seal scroll personally issued by me will be considered a declaration of war against the Dragon Slumber Temple. A series of large, flamboyant words were written with claws. The words were written in 3 languages, Draconic, Elvish, and Troll. When the 2 ancient colossal dragons saw these words, they were dumbfounded as well. Of course, they could feel the abnormal energy fluctuations in the depths of the cave. But they were more troubled by the warning signs. There's definitely something wrong inside. But that's still Her Majesty's handwriting. That strong aura of life has a faint sense of destruction. There's no way it's wrong. Then what do we do? This is too big. I'll go back and report it to Terranistas personally. You stay here with the other dragons. After returning, Terranistas also had a huge headache. The magic fluctuations there were too strange, too abnormal, and there had to be such a thing. It was simply asking for the dragon's life. Left with no choice, Terranistas found the second-in-command of the various dragons and explained the situation. He said to the Blue Dragon Queen, Syndagosa, and the second-in-command of the Bronze Dragon, Anachronos. Now that the 5 Majesties are at the most critical juncture, as jointly appointed by the 5 Majesties as the acting chief of the Dragon Slumber Temple, I give you an order. Ignore Her Majesty Alexstrasza's Dragon Seal scroll in the cave, and lead the special forces into the deepest part of that strange cave to find out what's going on. I'll bear any responsibility. There was nothing wrong with this order, and the Pentashade dragons were indeed uneasy and worried, so Syndagosa and Anachronos accepted the order. They brought their personal guards, as well as the elites selected from the Pentashade dragons. In total, there were 11 ancient dragons, 100 adult dragons, and nearly 1,000 dragon men and half-dragon men. They ignored the Dragon King's Dragon Seal scrolls one after another and charged into the belly of the mountain in one go, only to be hit. His Majesty Isurus. Snore. Yes, Syndagosa, Anachronos, and the other dragons were all King asleep. Their necks intertwined, and their claws tangled. If it was a human, this might be a very dirty scene. For the dragon race, this was just the inevitable result of Isra's personally made magic tools. Deep in the cave, Queen Sylvie was a little nervous. Duque, are you done? Don't rush me. It's about time. No. The main reason was that the 3 great dragon kings had given us were almost all used up. If they don't give up and continue to charge down, I'll make my move. Don't blame me for changing history then. Calm down, I still have illusions. Duque replied to Queen Sylvanas. Before he came, Duque asked the 3 dragon kings for the keepsakes and explained their uses. the three veteran Dragon Kings were very cooperative. Thinking about the fact that their old subordinates might be killed prematurely when they returned to the ancient times, they handed over non-lethal items. In fact, Syndagosa and the other dragons were a little apprehensive when faced with such a move from their leader. If Duque were to make a move, the immediate effect would be good, but the problem was that once the dragons woke up, they would think that this was a shameless trap set up by outsiders using the three Dragon Kings as a cover. If they had no scruples, they would suddenly advance. Duque could not guarantee that Maligo's wife would not die prematurely. There was a huge difference between Nesario killing the Blue Dragon King's wife and Duque killing his wife. Fortunately, this was Duque's plan and game. Just as the suspicious dragons who had been tricked by their Dragon King 10,000 years later carefully crept into the belly of the mountain, they found that the mountain was long gone. Just as Duque and the other two were secretly stirring up trouble in the ancient war, a muffled thunderous sound alarmed all the intelligent creatures on the south coast of Northrend. At the Moyaki port on the southern coast of the Dragonbone Wilderness was the settlement of the Kerouark walruses who had lived there for generations. The walruses walking upright were alarmed by the sound. They were originally holding a grand fishing competition, a special event to dispel the terrifying atmosphere of the cataclysm. This fishing competition even attracted the soldiers of the Scarlet Cross. As a measure of the Alliance's control of Northrend, an entire mechanized infantry division of the Scarlet Cross was ordered to be stationed in the southeast of the Dragonbone Wilderness. The Alliance was even allowed by the Dragon Slumber Shrine and the Green Dragon King Isra to build a military base called the New Hearth Valley next to the Emerald Dragon Sacred Land. But at this moment, be it the walruses or the human soldiers, they all looked up at the southern sky. At first, they only saw thick cotton-like clouds on the farthest end of their field of vision, on the island called the Ancient Beach. Suddenly, a terrifying roar came from the frozen sea, causing everyone's body to involuntarily tense up. The color of the sea has changed. After someone exclaimed, everyone realized that the shallow sea that was originally lighter in color seemed to be shrouded by a huge shadow. Not good. Retreat. Retreat. Everyone retreat from the coast. It must be Nesario. There were already some more eye-catching Alliance soldiers shouting, calling for their subordinates and walruses to retreat. But the next moment, a deafening roar burst out from the bottom of the sea. It sounded like an extremely low and muffled groan, but it was definitely not a simple sound. It was the soul roar of the strongest ancient beast. The sea around the ancient beach suddenly erupted. It was a huge water column with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers. It gushed up from the deepest part of the sea, easily tearing the atmosphere apart. The Alliance soldiers were all thrown to the ground by the shock wave brought by the huge wave. The soldiers turned over or rolled around in a sorry state, forcing themselves to look south. Unfortunately, this time they saw a hellish scene. The ancient beach that almost occupied the entire field of vision had disappeared, replaced by a huge whirlpool that made everyone's scalp tingle. It was as if the big whirlpool between the eternal existence and the endless sea had moved here. Everyone knew that was not the case. If there were geographers here, they would tell everyone that this was a tsunami and whirlpool brought about by the sudden movement of the seabed plates. Unfortunately, there were no geographers here. Everyone's eyes were attracted by the huge rocks that were ejected from the huge whirlpool. The huge rocks smashed towards the southern shore of the Dragonbone Waste like raindrops. Of course, those were not rocks at all, nor were they the deadly hellfire rain released by the Eridar warlocks. They were earth elemental giants that emitted a strange elemental glow. Chapter 1882. A large number of earth elemental life forms have been discovered. The enemy has airdropped earth elemental life forms in a cannon-like manner. 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. Unable to count, the rough estimate is over 10,000. The Wormris Temple has sent a request for help. As the two largest bases in Northrend controlled by the Alliance, Utgard Castle and the Fearless Fort each had different functions. The Fearless Fort, located on the edge of the North Wind Tundra in the southwest of Northrend, was an offshore fort very close to the shore and also a deepwater port close to the sea. Because of the open coastline, It was the Alliance's largest import and export trading port in the north. By encircling the sea and building a breakwater, it became the location of the Alliance's North Sea Fleet. A surface fleet consisting of 181 destroyers, 40 cruisers, and 12 battleships, in addition to the 44 flying battleships arranged on the northern coast of the Fearless Fort, formed a powerful mixed fleet. As for Utgard Castle, located in the center of the Howling Fjord in the southeast of Northrend, it was transformed into an air base that could be connected through the Dagger Sheath Bay and was surrounded by mountains. Usually, there was only a medium-sized flying battleship stationed here, and the number of ships never exceeded 100. But ever since the Alliance occupied Northrend, this place was built to accommodate 2 standard flying battleships of the Alliance. At the time of the Throne Conference, the Alliance leaders didn't understand. From a common-sense point of view, Northrend no longer had any so-called enemies. The world's 2 most powerful guardians, the Wyrmrest Temple and Order, were here. The only enemy that could be considered the Scourge had been erased, and even the current Lich King was on their side. Even if Duque only requested that the several air bases built around Utgard Castle only have berths and not too many supporting facilities, this still made the Alliance leaders puzzled. After all, leveling the land, paving roads, reserving fuel cabins, setting up security areas, sentry towers, and other things would still cost money and manpower. Naturally, Dumuk had his own halo before becoming a demigod, and he had repeatedly proven his foresight, making his name as the Peeper of Fate even more resounding, so no one really opposed it. In any case, even the cost of building the base was paid by the Marcus family, which would be deducted from the Alliance's membership fees. Duque said that if the base couldn't be used, then this debt wouldn't need to be paid by the Alliance. But everyone knew that a certain Du would never make a loss. With the arrival of the new Great Maelstrom, Utgard Castle and the Fearless Fortress became the front lines of the battlefield. In the Fearless Fortress, all kinds of alarms were ringing, and the latest magic surveillance mirror kept outlining the enemy's silhouette. More than 1,000 earth elemental creatures have been discovered at the bottom of the sea, the monitor shouted. Don't worry, that's the job of Vasht's underwater troops. Muradin Bronzebeard was very calm. Unless Vasht sends a request for help, we'll block the news from that side. Understood. Immediately after, new intelligence came. 3 Neltharion clones were found, plus a group of Twilight dragons, 800 adult dragons, 3,000 baby dragons, and the number is still increasing. Distance, 32,000 meters. Muradin tugged at his well-groomed beard. There are no dragons to cover us this time. Muradin turned to the 2 magic mirrors. Bu Lang, my good brother, do you think we should take that thing out? Bu Lang smiled and nodded. Second brother, without the help of the Wyrmrest Temple this time, if we wantonly deplete someone's griffins, he'll go crazy. Kudrin in the mirror next to him had a straight face. I only have 5,000 griffins, and it's 10 to 1. If you want to use the luminous barbarian dwarves, just say it. Muradin shrugged. Then use it. Anyway, Duque isn't here, so we have the final say. Everyone, listen up, switch to tungsten core armor-piercing bullets. The order was quickly passed down. Whether it was the fleet, the cannon positions of the Fearless Fortress, or the Naxxrama's flying fortress not far to the west of the Fearless Fortress, all the gunners got busy. Although both kinds of shells were placed nearby, it was still a mess to switch. When the Twilight Dragons entered within 10,000 meters of the line of defense formed by the 2 fortresses, thousands of cannons roared almost at the same time. Thousands of shells, because of the faint holy light contained in them, showed beautiful golden lines as they streaked across the sky. The trajectory of the shells was like a fireball that swept across the sky at high speed, dragging a long tail of flames that intertwined with each other. The tail quickly disappeared at the end, and the front kept elongating. One after another, layer after layer, it was as beautiful as the fireworks at the Winter Veil Festival. Before the war, every Twilight Dragon was told that the human cannons were useless. At most, the unlucky ones who were hit by too many shells would die, and nothing else, just a little pain. But when the massive number of shells poured down on the bodies of the Twilight Dragons like raindrops, it immediately caused an effect beyond the imagination of both sides. The shells, which were thought to be just a powerful toy, clearly had the same shape as before, but it seemed to be injected with a completely different mysterious power. With a higher level of mystery, it crushed the defense of the dragon race, which had run rampant in Azeroth for more than 25,000 years and had not been effectively broken. The tungsten core armor-piercing shells easily pierced through the dragon scales and skin. After entering the muscle tissue, they seemed to have a life of their own and came to life. Pieces of shrapnel tumbled, and the purple dragon scales, skin, and even muscles were blown up by the explosion. Although there was no result of death unless it hit the dragon's head, even if it hit the chest, there were too many shells. The continuous explosions formed a scene in the air that looked like the end of the world. There were purple fragments flying everywhere, and dirty flesh and blood formed a scene like rain. Even the Alliance officers who were observing the results of the battle were almost stunned by the scene in front of them. The explosion caused by the terrifying volley turned the entire space with a diameter of 3 kilometers into a dead space. Originally, in order to avoid collisions, the distance between the Twilight Dragons was a little scattered. Now it was even more scattered. After a round of cannon fire, a sieve-like flying formation was exposed in front of the Alliance army. 3 Neltharion clones are alive, and the number of Twilight Dragons has been reduced to 29%. The monitors summarized the monitoring results immediately. Kudrin curled his lips. The Wildhammer dwarves can handle those little dragons. Come on, it's not to the point where you have to sacrifice yourselves, Bulang complained. The weakening of the role of mid-level magical beasts such as griffins, hippogriffs, and dragon hawks on the battlefield was, in a sense, also caused by the changes of the times. Using the Twilight Dragons as opponents was too strong for the griffins. Basically, the griffins could only form teams to deal with the young dragons. Anything higher would not necessarily succeed even if they used their lives. Chapter 1883. Muradin decided, 2 more rounds of volleys. Leave it to the other troops. A volley of cannons was good for dealing with densely packed enemies, but it would be a waste if the number of enemies was too small or the spacing was sparse to a certain extent. Firing a volley of cannons was fun, but it was a pity that a round of cannons with nearly 10,000 shells would consume a kingdom's entire month's tax. No matter how Duque controlled the cost, even if he reduced the raw materials to almost free, the labor costs needed to produce the shells could not be eliminated and still had to be accounted for. There were cannons 5,000 meters away. For example, Naxxramas began to fire the new Longsong cannon, Death's Whisper, which had a caliber of more than 1,000 millimeters. At the same time, the Fearless Fortress below also began to drag out the Gustav cannon, which had shone brilliantly in the Wrath of the Lich King. A Longsong cannon of more than 800 millimeters, no matter how much of a brake was installed, would cause an earthquake after firing. However, it was undeniable that the shells fired by this powerful Longsong cannon were the greatest nemesis of Neltharion's avatars, which had a strong vitality. No matter how Neltharion's avatars healed their injuries, in the face of absolute destructive power, as long as they were hit, they could only type GG amidst laughter. Of course, if they could hit, the avatars were generally more than 100 meters long, but 20 kilometers away, they could not be seen even with binoculars. Hitting a 100-meter-long thing from 20,000 meters away was like using a cannon to hit a mosquito. Hitting it was like losing everything, but not hitting it was the right thing to do. Since Wing's avatars also had decent mobility, they could often only be calibrated remotely and then fired. Rather predictably, Naxxramas had 12 main cannons of the Grim Reaper model, and Gustav had 20. There were 8 Gustav on the Fearless Fortress. The battle continued, and the enemy air force that was still unrelenting within 5,000 meters was handed over to the new members of the Alliance. I, Aurelia Windrunner, in the name of the Wind Elemental Queen, Sylvanas Windrunner, ordered to attack and destroy those wyverns. In the sky, the valiant big sister Windrunner raised her bow. Within a radius of several kilometers around her, countless small tornadoes rushed towards Wing's avatars and the Twilight Dragons. This was the advantage of the Alliance controlling the Wind Elemental realm. As long as he controlled the Wind God throne, there would be new wind elemental creatures born out of thin air at every moment. Wind elemental creatures, or simply called air elementals, didn't possess a particularly high level of intelligence. Even so, they had basic intelligence and could only identify wind elementals and other creatures. As long as they were given a restricted fighting area, they would be great helpers on the battlefield. Without fear or hesitation, the air elements of various sizes swept towards the twilight dragons and engaged them in battle. One of the three-headed avatars was unlucky enough to be hit by two Gustav cannons, and it was blown apart in the air. The remaining two fought Aurelia, Lilith, Hadgeron Brightwing, and other elven rangers. The Windrunner family and even the rangers of Sindorii were the perfect example of when a man achieves the Tao, his fowls and dogs follow him to heaven. After obtaining the share of the wind element, Queen Sylvanas distributed a small portion. Any general among the blood elves could fly. "Eat my arrow." Aurelia drew her bow and knocked an arrow. A seemingly simple aimed shot, enhanced by the wind element, had the effect of the fortress's main cannon. The arrow blasted a bloody hole big enough for a carriage to pass through on the thigh of Nisario's avatar. The two avatars fought fiercely with the blood elven powerhouses. Only a small number of twilight dragons could break through the obstruction of the air elemental army and reach the range of the air fleet's anti-air artillery. Tungsten core armor-piercing bullets were not only used for large-caliber artillery. The Alliance also had them for small and medium-sized artillery of 40 millimeters and above. These miserable twilight dragons had to face the baptism of an even denser metal storm. Only the luckiest ones could break through the barrage of the anti-air artillery and fight Kudrin's griffins with their handicapped bodies. The battle situation in the Utgard castle was similar. It seemed that after being besieged by the Alliance and the Sleeping Dragon Temple, Nisario's side had also begun to improve. This was not a harassment battle, but a formal full-scale invasion. The offensive here was a standard air and ground coordination. Hundreds of thousands of earth elemental creatures were launched from the broken straits near the western part of the Howling Fjord to the plateau. After they landed, they turned into human forms and marched toward Utgard Castle in a wave-like manner. Above their heads were thousands of twilight dragons circling, and they were going to attack Utgard in unison. This kind of three-dimensional attack made it impossible for the Alliance to defend with air or land forces alone. Unlike the fearless fortress, all the earth elemental creatures were intercepted by Vasht's deep-sea troops. The Alliance here had to rely on themselves to deal with the earth elemental giants shot out from the maelstrom. Of course, because they were fighting on the plateau, the Alliance was able to deploy a large number of ground artillery groups. At the forefront was the Alliance's tank group, with more than 2,000 new diesel tanks. Not only were they equipped with antifreeze oil, but they also began to warm up under the engine's corresponding lower armor after receiving the alarm. When the Twilight Dragons had not yet flown to the plateau of the Howling Fjord, all the tanks had finished warming up. If they used tanks to deal with the Twilight Dragons, they would definitely die miserably, so every tank was prepared with standard tank fortifications. The tank fortifications were generally divided into two sections, one for shooting, the other for concealment, and there was a passage at the back, which was a slope. In the shooting section, the turrets could be exposed to carry out observation shots. In the concealment section, the entire vehicle including the turret was below the horizon, and the rear passage at a 30-degree angle could be used to evacuate the fortifications and carry out maneuvers. Standard tank fortifications need to be carefully camouflaged and must not reveal new soil. Nearby vegetation must be transplanted for camouflage to avoid being identified from a distance, and camouflage nets must be hung in the concealment section to avoid being discovered by aerial reconnaissance. A dwarf tank recruit repeatedly read the tank manual that was issued a month ago, and after reading it, the veteran next to him interrupted. "Kid, I've been serving in the Lightning Tank Regiment since the era of steam tanks. The tank manuals issued by the higher-ups are always so effective, and they are all written by our Alliance commander. But every Alliance general I know told me that Duke Marcus has never entered the cockpit of any tank. I can only say that our commander is a genius." Chapter 1884. Ugh. The recruit scratched his head. Remember the contents of the manual, it can save your life. It can also give you a few more medals on your chest. A few more stacks of bounty money in your pocket. The veteran smiled to relieve the pressure on the recruit. At this moment, the lookout shouted, "The enemy is within visual range." The recruit immediately placed his hand on the safety switch of the tank cannon nervously. At this moment, the dwarf, who was both a veteran and a commander, held him down. "What are you nervous about? The Alliance will never let the tanks fight the first wave. Infantry and cannons work together, we are considered infantry." As expected, the deafening sound of cannons bombarding came from the direction of Utgard Castle. Armor-piercing rounds and Type 3 rounds were not inferior to the momentum of the fearless fortress. They hit the Twilight Dragons head-on, directly crippling the enemy's air force. As Utgard's side was supported by the floating city Dalagen, the range of the magic cannons was relatively shorter, so the density of long-range artillery fire was definitely not as high as that of the fearless fortress. Therefore, the Alliance had deployed more flying battleships here, and they were all the latest dual-system flying battleships. There was no need to talk about the second-generation diesel propellers. The key was that the flying battleships were also equipped with the same anti-gravity arcane levitation system as the floating city Dalagen. It was completely driven by the magic transmitted by the magic net. It was said that the third-generation flying battleships also had a wind acceleration system. It was simply unimaginable how fast those things could fly. The improved Royal Brothel Group directly taught the dragons how to behave with an exaggerated hit rate. However, the main point here was the endless flow of earth elemental creatures flying to the plateau. William, who was in charge of Utgard Castle, gave the order for the tanks to fire freely after the heavy artillery plowed through the enemy's front line. "Open fire!" The leaders of the various tank teams roared almost simultaneously. The various commanders further emphasized, "Aim at the chest, the core of the earth elemental creatures is the key. If you can't destroy their core, these guys can replenish their bodies by absorbing the surrounding soil and rocks." The tank cannons hidden in the various tank fortifications let out an even more deafening roar. The long-range bombardment only covered an area. For the thick-skinned earth elemental creatures, the real damage was often less than the 88mm cannon of the Alliance's newly developed Tiger tank. Using the new tungsten core armor-piercing projectile, it could reach an armor-piercing depth of over 110mm at a distance of 2,000 meters. Earth elemental creatures were just rocks that were slightly harder. There was no way they could resist the insane armor-piercing bullets. Bang, bang, bang. This was very much like shooting practice, and they were all moving targets, but there were too many earth elemental creatures. They were so turbulent that they easily opened up a battle line of more than 100 kilometers on the plateau of the Howling Fjord. If one were to look from left to right, they would not be able to see the end. The tens of thousands of cannons that the Alliance had set up here were firing almost non-stop, but there were no signs of the Earth Elementals being destroyed. Instead, the Earth Elementals pushed against the cannons and advanced 2 kilometers toward Utgard Castle within half an hour. How terrifying! Even if all the men in Stormwind were to be used to defend against them, it wouldn't be enough, William lamented. Valilla, who was beside him, shrugged. Fortunately, my dagger can still split the latest cannonballs. Otherwise, I'm starting to wonder if melee professions will be eliminated from the stage of history. Brawl Bearskin comforted her. Melee professions must be preserved. It's obvious that the will of planet Azeroth has given professionals different levels of power. This allows professionals to be superior to technology at certain times and in many fields. William waved his hand and turned to look at the flaming pharaoh in the magic mirror. "Oh, it's up to you now." "All right, leave it to me." Kale, that still had that gentle and refined look on his face, but everyone knew that everything was different now. Kale, that Sunstrider had become the new demigod of the Alliance 4 days ago. He and his phoenix mount, Ao, had been tempered in the Land of Fire and had been recognized by the will of planet Azeroth. Now, they had completely merged to become the demigod of Phoenix and Flames. He was under Duke's command, so he was a subordinate god in the standard sense, Kale, who was sitting in the second tallest mage tower in the Dalajan, raised his hands high under the respectful gazes of the Kirin Tor counselors and the middle-ranked pharaoh. Flames formed by phoenix fires slowly extended from his cloth shoulder armor. They did not burn his clothes at all. Instead, they were like a cape fluttering in the wind, fluttering behind him even though there was no wind. Kale, golden hair and eyebrows had long been replaced by bright red flame strands. These were all condensed from the purest fire element in the world. However, with his amazing control, every strand of hair was harmless, and its power was absolutely restrained. Even children who did not understand the elements or magic could easily pull it. It's cold. Enilis, the eldest princess of the Marcus family, had personally commented with a giggle. Kale, opened his hands slightly, and the cape behind him fluttered like a phoenix spreading its wings. An ancient elemental language floated out of Kale, mouth. Using the elements as a medium, it resounded throughout the surrounding world. I, Kale, Sunstrider, as the representative of the Supreme King of Flames, Duke Marcus, order all fire elementals to attack every earth elemental in your field of vision. The war between the four major elements was known as the Eternal War. Perhaps there was a brief alliance, but most of the time, once they met, they would attack each other without saying a word. It was usually difficult to stop without fighting to the death. Even low-level elemental creatures with the most basic intelligence were like this. From the north to the south, along the front line of the Alliance's defense line, countless fire elemental creatures suddenly charged out of the flaming teleportation doors. Rushing forward was like burning rocks. The earth elementals, on the other hand, gave up on charging forward. They raised their huge fists and punched the fire elemental creatures. How could the earth elementals, which sounded tangible, be invisible fire elementals? In fact, there was a saying called elemental erosion in a confrontation between elements. When there was too much earth elemental in the body of a fire elemental creature, it would be like a puddle of clear water filled with too much mud, turning into a lump of mud. The fire elemental here would turn into a clay figurine and then completely shatter. This was considered dead. If there was too much fire elemental, the earth elemental creature would also be bathed in flames, and then it would also shatter and collapse. The war between elements didn't seem bloody, but in the eyes of mages, this was the cruelest war of annihilation. Chapter 1885. The fire elementals are on our side, right? They're all mixed up, how do we fight them? The tank gunners were dumbfounded. The messenger above spat a mouthful of saliva at them. Don't joke around. Don't use holy light cannons, use pure tungsten core armor-piercing bullets. We create explosions to help our own people, our own fire elemental warriors. The bombardment resumed, and the battlefront on Utgard's side stabilized. In the face of the ferocious Neltharion clones, the demigod Kaisi made a move for the first time. He was clearly showing off his love with Caponia recently, but he acted like a lifelong member of the FFF group and directly burned them to teach those wings of light a lesson. The battle with the clones was a little lackluster. The clones had good attack, defense, and regeneration abilities, but they lacked decisive ultimate moves or special skills. At most, they could cause trouble for the Alliance and bully the Alliance subbases that did not have demigod-level combat power. Against Kaisi, defeat was only a matter of time. In fact, even Neltharion himself did not expect those clones to be able to kill the powerhouses of the Alliance. After fighting for so long, the old Wings of Light also knew that the powerhouses of the Alliance were not only very resilient, but also liked to stick together. That exaggerated teleportation link made it impossible for him to create a diversion. Unless his main body was there was no way to seal the surrounding space and cause the teleportation spell to fail. All the clones were used to buy time and stall the powerhouses of the Alliance. The real main direction of attack of the Armageddon was, of course, the Dragonbone Wilderness to the north of the New Vortex. In the face of hundreds of thousands of earth elementals and over 10,000 adult twilight dragons, the Dragon Sleep Temple put on a huge lineup that was rarely seen so far. In the void battlefield above the planet's atmosphere, only the minimum number of scouts and Void Fortress defense troops were left. Those dragons with rich combat experience were all called back. It was rare in history for so many dragons to gather together like today. The last time there was such a scene was back in the ancient war 10,000 years ago, when the 5-colored dragons gathered and angrily attacked the Burning Legion. Now, even they themselves were shocked by the magnificent scene of the dragons flying into the air and gathering together. The red dragons, yellow dragons, and green dragons lined up in order, the blue dragons with a smaller number rushed into the sky, and the shabbiest group of adult black dragons were at the back of the formation. In any case, the 5 dragon tribes that were once divided were now united as one. It wasn't just the standard chromatic dragons. Even the lesser dragons joined the Sleeping Dragon Coalition under Alexstras's call. They included the archosaurs that lived in the ice and snow of Northrend, the dinosaurs of the Ungoro crater, and so on. Some dragons spread their wings wide enough to blot out the sky, while some dragons were as small as mosquitoes. Regardless of whether they were old dragons that had experienced the vicissitudes of life or young dragons that had just learned how to fly, they all joined the team. This was an order from the dragon aspects. However, the dragon that took to the air first did not immediately pounce on the invading enemy. Instead, it circled above the mountains and used the air currents to wait for its brothers to arrive. These dragons filled the sky, forming layers of ranks from high to low. They circled in a regular route to avoid colliding with each other. On the ground, large batches of Draconians and Half-Draconians were pouring out of the Dragon Slumber Shrine's gates one after another. They formed a neat square formation and formed the core of the defensive line on the ground. On the other hand, the terrestrial dinosaurs that could not fly consciously circled around and gathered on both sides, tentatively forming a formation. Faced with this scene, anyone who witnessed this scene would think that they had seen the end of the world. Perhaps it really was the end of the world. The members of the dragon race knew that the great traitor Nesario had done all kinds of evil. This deadly poisonous thorn was stuck in the throats of every dragon, and no one would be indifferent to that kind of stinging pain. The dragon's blood was boiling, and their thunderous roars resounded through the sky. Everyone was waiting for the upcoming battle. The enemy's boss, Nesario, had not yet appeared, so naturally, there would not be a Dragon King on the Sleeping Dragon Coalition's side. At this stage, the 4-colored dragon race's second-in-command, led by Krasis, was holding down the fort. Krasis did not know that he had escaped death because of Du's interference. He was shuttling back and forth between the various phalanxes with Kalego's fiancée, Matagosa, and the other second-in-command, coordinating the various dragon race armies. Krasis was a little ashamed. The Dragon Slumber Shrine had long been accustomed to magical communication, but the other more primitive dragon race still remained at the level of shouting orders. Fortunately, the command of the opposing earth elemental creatures was even worse, otherwise, there was no telling what would have happened. Compared to the chaotic dragon coalition, the human fleet hovering in the sky further north was much quieter and orderly. This fleet, 10,000 meters away, would provide the long-range support that the dragon race lacked the most. Krasis was worried, so he used magic to confirm it. His spirit connected to the magic network. "Your Majesty Proudmoore, can you hear me?" "Very clear, Krasis." Jaina sat helplessly on a throne that was obviously arranged in the bridge. "That's right." The Alliance was really lacking fleet commanders. It should be said that there was a shortage of commander-level talents with more than 100,000 people. Originally, Jaina was a standard mage girl, but she had to be pulled in. She was now sitting on the flagship of the Alliance's new Iron Cross fleet, Bismarck. Jaina did not know what the hell Bismarck was. The name was set by Dumoke, and she could not change it. In other aspects, Duque was very tolerant, but when it came to the naming of the ship, he definitely had the final say. This steel beast hovering in the sky not only had the traditional cannons of the Alliance, but it also had a very exaggerated thing that needed a Breaking Dawn Archmage to control. Jaina sighed. "What about the Dragon King?" "Still arguing, but there will be a result soon." At the highest level of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, the 5 Dragon Kings were still arguing. "Damn, Is Duque not back yet? Alexstrasza was indeed a little anxious. Her red eyes stared at Nozdorm. The Space Dragon King was still expressionless. I will know when he completes the mission. Just don't get lost in the river of time like last time. I heard that he came back for a few years. The Dragon Slumber Shrine can't wait for a few years. The Red Dragon Queen had the urge to flip the table. Sister, calm down. It is our Emerald Dragon Holy Land that is under attack now. Isra still looked calm and composed. The Green Dragon Holy Land was by the sea. It and the new Hearth Valley next to it naturally became the first target of Nesario's Armageddon army. However, because Vashj was personally guarding the shallow waters by the sea, there was no way for Neltharion to let the Earth Elementals land by walking on the seabed. He could only use the human cannon method to shoot batches of Earth Elementals ashore. Chapter 1886. Unexpectedly, Isra was kind enough to allow the Alliance to build a fortress next to the Holy Land, which helped the Green Dragons instead. In the new Hearth Valley to the east of the Emerald Holy Land, Duque worked overtime before he left. He asked the Alliance to deploy more than 500 dual 113mm anti-aircraft cannons on the southern coastal mountain wall. These anti-aircraft cannons had a larger caliber than the main cannon of a tank. Although they did not have the high firing rate of the 40mm bang-bang cannon used by the warship, which was about 1 round per second, this new type of anti-aircraft cannon was very powerful. They formed a dense anti-air net, and almost half of the Earth Elemental creatures that were thrown out were shot down. As long as they hit, most of the stone people flying in the air would fall into the sea. Sea beasts like the giant octopus that had been waiting under the water would swarm up and drag the Earth Elemental creatures away to kill them. This greatly bought time for the Dragon Sleep Temple to set up the formation. When a large number of Earth Elemental creatures poured into the new Hearth Valley, the Alliance abandoned this fortress, and their personnel began to withdraw to the Emerald Holy Land next door. The Naga troops led by the Deepwater Lord Karathres stayed behind to fight the Earth Elemental creatures. At the top of the Dragon Sleep Temple, Alexstrasza was finally convinced. Isra said, I know your determination to defend the Dragon Sleep Temple, sister. In fact, we all have the same feeling. But without the soul of the dragon, we can't kill Nethario at all. So my opinion is, unless Nethario attacks the top of the Dragon Sleep Temple, we don't make a move. The Red Dragon sister was extremely conflicted. This is not the first time. In order to create the strongest weapon in history, we must dedicate our essence to fight against the most powerful traitor in the history of the 5-colored dragons, Nethario. If that's not enough, we still have claws, teeth, and other weapons to attack him. Isn't that right? Isra's calm words calmed his sister's restless mood. Alexstrasza smiled bitterly. I suddenly feel like you're more like the head of the 5-colored dragons than me. No, it's just that you're under too much pressure, sister. Nozdormu had facial paralysis most of the time. He was a generation lower than Kalegos, so he couldn't talk to him. Onyxia, on the other hand, became bolder. It's okay, we can still order the wilderness demigod around. Although those guys are a little weak, they can still hold on for a long time. The only demigod in the wilderness who could fight in the air was Avienna. In fact, the Raven Goddess was far inferior to the weakest of the 5 dragon aspects, Kalegos. Instead of letting them be bombarded by Nesario outside, it was better to place them on the first floor of the entrance to the Wormwrist Shrine. The powerful spatial seal made it so that no matter who entered the Dragonsleep Shrine's main entrance, they would have to walk. Alexstrasza's face turned red. If we get attacked there, then the Dragon Slumber Temple will lose all face. Isra was rather practical. Didn't we already lose face when Nesario betrayed us? Her sister was right. The Red Dragon Queen was speechless. But at the end of the day, everyone unconsciously shifted their attention back to Duque. Even Isra was muttering to himself, Duque, you bastard. I won't forgive you for coming back so late. Onyxia, on the other hand, did not seem to care. After entering the Wormwrist Shrine, she was basically in human form. She had no intention of being a dragon at all. She seemed to be very leisurely crossing her legs, her right index finger twirling the tip of her long black curly hair, twirling and twirling it. Her face revealed a honey of trust that the other dragons could not understand. It's okay, until the world is destroyed, I will absolutely believe in Duque. No one knew that at this moment, this once incomparably cunning female black dragon was undergoing the final interrogation of her dragon heart. This concerned whether she would really open her heart and completely believe in a man in the future. The ancient dragons all knew that the Dragon King could not be mobilized. Otherwise, once they needed to inject power into the dragon soul and were held up, it would not be fun. They could only rely on themselves, and the alliance of the mortal races that many dragons were not willing to believe in more than a decade ago. After the Destruction Army realized that attacking the Emerald Dragon Holy Land in the southeast of the Wyrmrest Shrine was not effective, they first destroyed the Walrus people's Moyaki port in order to have a better landing, and then went all the way north. Although tens of thousands of stone men were left to attack the Azure Dragon Holy Land in the southwest of the Wyrmrest Shrine, the main force was divided into two groups. One group went straight through the two holy lands and went straight to the Wyrmrest Shrine. The other larger group went around to the west, through the snow-covered drifting snow forest, and attacked the Wyrmrest Shrine. In the flagship command room of Bismarck, Jaina sighed. "What's wrong?" Egwene asked. Jaina rested her chin on her right hand and propped her head up. "It'll be fine if Duque doesn't go for a few years this time." "Phew! Aren't you all full of energy to prove that the Alliance can fight against evil without Duque?" Egwene laughed. "Nowadays, in the Alliance, that's a paradox." Jaina laughed lightly. Holding the weapons and equipment that Duque led the way in developing, using the taxes that Duque brought in to revitalize the economy to nurture an army, and shouting, "We can do it without Duque," isn't that a joke? Egwene shrugged. "That's true. All right, there's no time to be sad. At least we have to hold on and make sure that the situation doesn't collapse." Jaina looked at the magical screens that had a sci-fi feel to it, and saw the position of the enemy's main force. She waved her hand. "All fleet main cannons, prepare to fire." A minute later, the sound of cannons that seemed to come from the distant horizon faintly came to the dragons, and then countless cannonballs that were as dense as a swarm of locusts whistled past not far from the feet of the flying dragons. It wasn't just the roar of cannons, but also the roar of modern technology. Artillery skills that had been tempered thousands of times, coupled with the dual guidance of technology and magic, guided each cannonball through the space between the flying dragons and the earth dragons, blasting into the group of twilight dragons in the sky. It was almost a replica of the aerial battle between the Fearless Fortress and Utgard Castle. The new Holy Light version of the tungsten core armor-piercing shell had a miraculous effect on the twilight dragons. After 3 rounds of rapid firing, the twilight dragon formation in the sky became a pitiful basket. Krasis was a little excited and shouted with magic amplification, "It's time! Chromatic dragons!" This was the agreed signal. 3 rounds of simultaneous firing, and then immediately snatching control of the air. Tens of thousands of dragons flapped their wings and accelerated. Like countless heavy machine guns, they ferociously plunged into the group of twilight dragons that had become sparse and messy. The enemy's scattered formation and unstable morale gave the Sleeping Dragon Alliance a great advantage. Chapter 1887. On the other hand, Krasis and the other ancient dragons were entangled with Nisario's avatars. They flapped their wings and made all sorts of difficult hovers in the air. Some of them even made sudden stops and flew backward. They kept using their dragon breaths to destroy the ever-growing avatars of Darkwing. Of course, it looked a little futile. After so many battles, both sides basically had a pattern. The size of the avatars of Darkwing also depended on the size of the avatars. If they were twice the size of an ordinary ancient dragon, then the ancient dragon could still win with numbers. 3 to 5 times the size of the avatars could be dealt with by a single guardian, aspect dragon, or demigod of the Alliance or the Sleeping Dragon Alliance. If it was more than 5 times, they would have to gather many big shots to deal with it. Now, these were basically big guys that were about 5 times the size, but the demigods of the Sleeping Dragon Alliance could not attack due to special reasons. This was really hard on the ancient dragons. However, it was not like the Alliance did not have any countermeasures. No one noticed that Jaina's flagship, Bismarck, had already sneaked forward. It was less than 2 kilometers away from the main battlefield where Nisario's avatars were. This was definitely a very close distance for an aerial battle. No one discovered the Bismarck, because the 4 ancient green dragons, Layson, Amalise, Tyrol, and Isodra, had joined hands to create a magic formation that perfectly concealed the human battleship with its illusion and aura concealment. Back then, the 4 nightmare dragons had always played the role of the backbone of the Green Dragon army after escaping the fate of death. Under Isra's most trusted male green dragon, second-in-command Iranicus, they were the most capable of fighting in the Green Dragon army. Those avatars that were not directly controlled by Nisario did not notice the danger that was close at hand at this time. On Bismarck, Master Craftsman Gerben was sweating profusely. He nervously paid attention to the data of the battleship and finally nodded at Jaina. Jaina pressed a red button on the flagship beside the captain's seat. The moment she pressed it, the entire battleship began to change shape. As a test ship, Bismarck was a rare flying battleship that was purely powered by magic power. After abandoning the high-powered propellers pulled by diesel engines, it used an anti-gravity magic engine similar to the Dalagen's. Being completely connected to the weave also meant that without it, the entire ship would be like a stranded whale, unable to move at all. On the other hand, as long as it was within the range of the weave, with the support of Pharaoh who had extremely high authority, the Bismarck would be the representative of the weave. The upper and lower layers of the ship have separated. The connection to the weave is working. Confirmation of highest authority in the weave. Magic circuit warm-up test. Test normal. In the command deck, a group of female communications soldiers and radiant moon mages were busy. As one of the greatest experiments in combining technology and magic, Bismarck was displaying its extraordinary side to the world. The largest hull, which was 241.55 meters long and 36 meters wide, was neatly opened near the waterline of a ship. The opening was so flat that one could tell that it wasn't a crack, but that it had the structure to open itself. It looked like the main body of the ship was slowly separating from the bottom of the ship. There were still some metal pumps and hooks connecting the upper and lower parts of the ship, looking a little like the fangs of a dragon. However, the huge cannon that was exposed in the air and sandwiched between the 2 sections of the ship made the 4 ancient dragons who were on the verge of becoming the nightmare dragons feel their hearts palpitate. This huge cannon that was more than 200 meters long and 10 meters in diameter almost pierced through the entire hull. It was obviously something that had nothing to do with science. Anyone with the slightest bit of elemental sensing would be able to sense that the weave had opened up 12 huge ports in the void around it. The mana that these ports could send through every second was equivalent to the mana of an adult blue dragon. As Duque's woman, Jaina had the highest status among the secondary controllers of the weave. She could use as much mana as she wanted, but it didn't exceed the upper limit of her control. If not for the 4 ancient green dragons acting as a cover, just the mana fluctuations from the weave would be enough to make the army of destruction jump in anger. A huge amount of mana was quickly injected into the huge cannon in the belly of the Bismarck, charging it. The frost element from the water elemental realm quickly lit up the mysterious Titan runes on the cannon's body. As if it was a lighting ceremony at night, the runes on the cannon lit up from the stern all the way to the muzzle at the bow. In the command room, Gerben was sweating profusely as he stared at the data interface of the various main cannons. The pressure on the metal walls of Area K3 is too high. If we go any further, it'll explode. Got it? Jaina's face was expressionless as beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. The welding process for Area B7 is not up to standard. Damn it. I'm going to kill the brat in charge of that area. Gerben continued to shout. Got it. Jaina was furious. Controlling such a powerful new magic cannon was definitely not as easy as others thought. Magic cannons were nothing new. The Dalagen had always had them. Just like how traditional cannons were divided into calibers and ammunition, magic cannons were also divided into different grades. The Dalajan's old magic cannons were powered by stored mana. It was just like how Duque had stored his spare mana in magic crystals a long time ago and used it to save the day when necessary. This method was relatively more stable and safe. However, in order to not be like how the Dalajan and Kel Thuzad's Naxxramas bombarded each other, the Dalajan magic cannons had no choice but to reduce the power of the magic cannons. The modified magic cannons on the Bismarck were even more daring. The body of the cannon was only a medium to temporarily store mana. A large amount of elemental filtration and stabilization work was left to the weave. This was only an experimental stage. In reality, Khadgar, the manager of the weave, and Jaina, the person with the highest authority in the outside world of the weave, were working together to launch the magic cannons. If the experiment was successful, the Alliance would be able to equip magic cannons on a large scale in the future. After all, cannons that used TNT were considered kinetic weapons. Compared to energy weapons like magic cannons, both had their own advantages. Walking on two legs was much better than relying on just one move. 80% charged, but the cannon can't hold on much longer. Jurbin shouted again. All right. Sigh of the Aurora Goddess, fire. Jaina finally punched the red firing button. The huge cylindrical cannon trembled. The next moment, the unique white light of the frost element poured out from the round obsidian cannon's muzzle. This new type of or collected from Uldum displayed excellent resistance to the cold. In an instant, it was as if the goddess of winter had descended. Chapter 1888. The white iciness conquered the distance of 2,000 meters in one breath and shot towards the target. The two Neltharion clones that were lured into the muzzle were hit directly. The fangs of the white icy cold energy directly bit through the dragon skin of the Deathwing clone. The dragon-like limbs that were still shaking and baring their fangs a moment ago became stiff and motionless. The cold of absolute zero penetrated every cell in the body of the Deathwing clone in 0.01 seconds, and what was even more terrifying was the elemental erosion that followed. If anyone could slice the body tissue of the Deathwing clone and put it under a microscope, they would clearly see that the originally violent, rapidly proliferating and dividing cells had suddenly become as slow as an old woman. The water in the cells all turned into icicles, piercing the cell wall of every cell like a hedgehog. The same thing was happening to every single cell in his body. The huge dragon body that was noisy and full of disgusting shaking a second ago became deathly still under the sweep of the cold current. Without a sound, the gigantic dragon clone turned into a large ice sculpture, which made the dragon feel very unhappy. The ice sculpture that lost its support fell from a height of 1,000 meters to the ground. Crack! The two Deathwing clones were directly shattered. Oh! The shocking scene in the magic mirror directly made the Alliance soldiers who witnessed this scene reach a climax. They clenched their fists, raised their arms, and shouted loudly. Confirmed that targets 1 and 3 have been completely destroyed. The voice of the monitor girl spread throughout the bridge of the Bismarck. Phew! Jaina and Jurbin's tense hearts finally relaxed. At this point, killing a Deathwing clone was not something to be proud of. What was worth being proud of was the fact that with the combination of magic and technology, he had killed a demigod-level monster at the Breaking Dawn level. Killing enemies of a higher level was something that could only be encountered by chance since ancient times. In particular, it was even more difficult to normalize this kind of behavior. Under Duque's suggestion, mortals were working hard to make this impossible possible with their own wisdom and creativity. Before Duque left for ancient times, he once said, Azeroth has its own planet's will. When a planet is plagued with disasters, the planet will release the restrictions it has set up, allowing more mortals to have the space and opportunities to break through. It was foreseeable that there would be more Breaking Dawn wizards one day. Although the streets won't be filled with Breaking Dawns, I reckon that it won't be a problem for the Alliance to nurture a dozen or so Breaking Dawns. With just a Breaking Dawn Great Wizard holding the fort and the support of the giant warships and cannons, They had the battle prowess to threaten a demigod. What a magnificent feat of leaps and bounds! Being immersed in this magnificent feat and legend, the great gnome craftsman Gerben felt a sense of bliss. Jaina was the only one who was more clear-headed. Transfer the battle data immediately. Bismarck left the scene at top speed. Nesario will probably go crazy. We have to save this prototype as much as possible. Weapons that had not been tested in actual combat were mostly trash. As long as the experiment was generally successful, the subsequent modifications would be a piece of cake, provided that the most crucial prototype was preserved. Nesario seemed to have also discovered the need to destroy this strange human creation. More clones began to emerge from the southern vortex of Dragonbone Wasteland. At that moment, no one noticed that the Alliance's plan was still going on. What is the most important thing in modern warfare? Air supremacy. Neither the Sleeping Dragon Coalition Army nor the Armageddon Army realized why the Alliance was so eager to eliminate the Twilight Dragons in the air. Although the Twilight Dragons could be mass-produced like instant noodles, the number of Twilight Dragons that could be dispatched per unit of time was limited. This depended on the number of Twilight Dragons that could serve as commanders, as well as the upper limit of Nesario's willpower. Even the Sleeping Dragon Temple itself did not notice that Duque had thrown out a set of calculations before leaving. If the base number of adult Twilight Dragons was set to 1, then the combat power of a Twilight Dragon was equivalent to that of an ancient dragon. Together with the adult dragons that he could control, there were basically 300. Then, the maximum number that Nesario could command fluctuated between 12,000 and 20,000. This depended on the distance between his main body and the group of Twilight Dragons, as well as the complexity of the situation. This meant that Nesario could only command about 10,000 adult dragons to fight at most. Any more and the undisciplined Twilight Dragons would let loose and act recklessly. There were 3 major battles going on at the same time. Once the Twilight Dragons in the sky above the main battlefield were cleared, a new batch of Twilight Dragons would replace them, and there would be a vacuum above the battlefield for about 5 minutes. At an altitude of 4,000 meters, a giant transport ship of the Alliance began to drop magic nuclear bombs. In fact, this thing had nothing to do with nuclear energy. At this stage, the Alliance was far from being a nuclear in terms of power supply or science and technology. This could not stop Duze's yearning for big bombs. Since Nesario also knew that he could not destroy the Sleeping Dragon Temple with just the Twilight Dragons, and instead bet on the Earth Elementals from the Deep Rock continent, he just had to blow up the Earth Elementals. Little Fatty number 2 fell with a loud bang. Not a single Twilight Dragon, not even Nesario himself, who was hiding in the dark, realized how terrifying this magic bomb was. The last time the Alliance sent out such a big bomb, it was during the Wrath of the Lich King, when the tribe rebelled. Winterspring was a cold and remote place, and there were no Twilight believers. When the iconic mushroom cloud rose, Nesario was dumbfounded. On the land covered in ice and snow, colorful flames were dancing on the ground and in the air. A few seconds later, the terrifying shock wave set off by the mixture of elements and explosives swept over. Shaking, explosions, ear-piercing noises, everything became a symbol of the tragic loss of the Earth Elemental Army. In the open space where the Earth Elemental creatures gathered, Little Fatty number 2 exploded in the middle of the giant Earth Elemental elite group that had gathered there. The core area was directly turned into a huge crater with a diameter of 500 meters. Naturally, the Earth Elementals in that place did not even have their bones left. With a series of loud bangs, rubble flew in the army of stone people, and the stones that were blown away fell on the heads and bodies of their companions like hailstones. There were no continuous screams. The Earth Elemental creatures landed on the beach in silence and died silently. This was just the beginning, not the end. More and more little fatty bombs were thrown down, and the ground rose into the sky, dazzling the dragons. Finally, the real Nesario roared and rose into the air from the huge sea vortex. His voice echoed over and over again in the entire Dragonbone waste. My brothers and sisters, it's time to settle the score. Chapter 1889. Never reason with a madman, or he will pull you into the world of deep-well ice and kill you instantly with his better skills. It was clear that he was the first to be driven mad by the whispers of the ancient gods and betrayed the dragon slumber shrine. However, in his long-winded description, it became that after the battle at the Dark Portal, the 4 dragon aspects had cooperated with the despicable and shameless Duke Marcus and joined forces with the rebellious Onyxia to murder him in order to seize his throne. Now he was the one who set off the flames of revenge. Alexstrasza, who was watching this scene from the top of the Wormwrist shrine, gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. Nonsense! Nosdormu was not angry at all. It doesn't matter what he says. No dragon in their right mind will approve of him. What we are worried about now is whether this Nesario is the real deal and whether our allies can stop him. Isra stared at the death wing in the magic mirror for a long time, then smiled bitterly and shook his head. I can't tell. He and his clone also have the same crazy will. He is no longer in existence that I can distinguish between the real and the fake with my power. However, the Dragon Kings were certain that at least the death wing in the magic mirror was very similar to the real deal. He also had the constantly proliferating dragon limbs like the clone. This was like a kind of decaying scabies that completely affected the city. The biggest difference between him and the other clones was not his size, but the black source armor on his body. This mysterious black metal could only be found in the newly developed Aldum and other places. The only thing that was known was that this source not only had the effect of stabilizing certain special energies, but it was also very hard. It was so hard that even the Dragon King's claws could not easily pierce through it. At this moment, after seeing Nesario's iron chin, Onyxia said, "It's my father, there's no doubt about it." Alexstrasza's eyes lit up. "You feel the blood connection?" "No," Duque mentioned the term iron chin. "I didn't know before, but I know now. It's him." The Black Dragon Princess was very sure. The Red Dragon Queen frowned. After a few seconds, she sighed. "Tell the other dragons to make way. Don't try to stop this Nesario. Let him charge into the first floor of the Dragon Sleep Shrine." They were betting on the god of the wilderness and the guardians. With just one command, Deathwing had gone on a killing spree. It was unknown what instructions Enzoth had given him, but Nesario seemed to want to vent the bitterness of being suppressed for the past few days, or as if he had begun to let loose after Duque was not around. After he appeared, he did not go straight to the Dragon's Slumber Shrine, but instead started a massacre in the sky. It was even swifter than a comet that flew across the sky and even more blazing than the sun that shone on the earth. Just the flapping of its gigantic wings in the air and the huge waves of flames that it created were enough to burn an ordinary adult pentashade giant dragon's body with lust and make it fall to the ground while screaming in pain. Not only the chromatic dragons, but all the dragon-type creatures in the air, including the Twilight Dragon, were burned to ashes. Ha! Ha! The entire sky of the Dragonbone Wilderness reverberated with Neltharion's wanton laughter. "My brother! My sisters! For the forgotten hatred! For an even greater world I, Deathwing, have come! What about you? Do you, the Guardians, have to hide in the shell of the Dragon's Slumber Shrine like a tortoise?" The Dragon's Slumber Shrine's response was only silence. In the sky, as long as the dragons could fly away, even the dinosaurs and other vassals of the dragons on the ground ran away. They were only responsible for fighting the Earth Elemental Army, and nothing else. "Ha! Do you think you can hide from me just by hiding? And Duke Marcus, do you think your little tricks will work again this time, and you can trick me with a despicable trap?" Deathwing raised its chin that was emitting a metallic luster and continued to laugh wildly. "Ha! I'm different. I'm really different." In the midst of his laughter, Deathwing flapped his wings. It seemed like he was flying normally, but who knew that the earth would suddenly erupt with a loud rumble? For a moment, the earth shook. The earth was collapsing and cracking, and the Dragonbone Wilderness, which had been frozen for the past hundreds of millions of years, suddenly flashed with an ominous glow. In the northwest and northeast directions of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, there was a huge bulge. At first, it looked like 2 mountains rising slowly from the ground. Then, the mouths of the two mountains split open and spewed out thousands of tons of blazing magma. The two huge volcanic craters were hitting the space barrier of the dragon slumber shrine at a high temperature unimaginable to mortals. Impossible! Alexstrasza and Isra exclaimed at the same time. This was just the beginning, not the end. Deathwing, who was hovering in the sky, continued to laugh wildly. Idiot! Where do you think my clone came from? Now, I'll tell you. His wings split open. They broke into thousands of pieces, and then, with a powerful and unparalleled momentum, like a cover covering the sky and earth, poured down on the circular area with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers below him. Whether it was the earth dragons, dragon men, draconians who could not escape in time, or the dragon remains that had been sleeping in this wilderness for who knows how many years and had long become bones, all of them underwent shocking changes. Roar, roar, roar. The Tyrannosaurus Rex suddenly grew another head. It did not look like a dinosaur, but a typical black dragon head. The horned dragon with long, sharp horns suddenly split open its abdomen and turned into a terrifying monster with more than 5 mouths full of sharp teeth. The skeletons of dragons that had lost their lives for more than 10,000 years suddenly grew flesh and blood. The body with countless mouths, teeth, and tongues could not be considered a dragon at all, but a deformed one. Sinestra, who had died in the previous invasion, as well as the leaders of the Twilight Dragons, Cenarion and Variona, all stood up shakily again. After they regained their mobility, the first thing they did was to attack the dragons that were still normal near them. No matter how Nesario tormented his mutated body, it could be clearly seen that all the corpses, regardless of race, had been turned into treasures by him. There were so many humorous WMs, and a casual estimate would put the total number at more than 100,000. 100,000 corpse dragons and mutant dragons. Regardless of their quality, just the number alone far exceeded the total number of ice dragons that the Calamity Army had at its peak. Control? No need. Just these corpse dragons and mutant dragons alone. You shameless blasphemer! Alexstrasza was completely enraged when she saw this scene. Come on, Alexstrasza and Duque. I've already made my move. Didn't you want to plot against me? What tricks do you have? Just use them. Nesario yelled wildly. At this moment, Nozdormu's poker face could no longer remain calm. He said softly, Duque, what are you waiting for? Chapter 1890. Was Duque back? The answer was yes. If there was anyone who could monitor Duque's time, it had to be the Lord of Time, Nozdormu. This was different from the last time. Due to special reasons, Duque had delayed for several years and missed too many events. How could Nozdormu not learn from his mistakes this time? He had been monitoring Duque's situation the whole time. As soon as Duque successfully dealt with the signal sent by the Dragon Soul, he couldn't wait to pick up Duque and the other two. However, Duque didn't show up directly. He didn't even inform any of his acquaintances, nor did he let himself reconnect to the magic net. The only reason Duque went into hiding was naturally because of something more important. For this, he asked Nozdormu to let the three of them hide in the Cavern of Time. The Cavern of Time in Teneris was not only the lair of the Bronze Dragon King, but also a special place outside the world of this point in time. Even an ancient evil god like Zoth couldn't detect whether Duque had returned. Duque replied in the Bronze Dragon King's unique time transmission. It's not time yet. Nozdormu, don't you realize that the cards are not right? It doesn't matter if it's ours or Nesario's. Nozdormu fell silent. Nesario was indeed crazy, but it wasn't the most complete and irrational kind of madness. If he, who claimed to be the Wing of Death, had attacked with his main body at the beginning of the cataclysm, perhaps he would really be completely crazy. In that case, no matter which side it would be a one-sided deal, and the outcome would be decided directly. Nesario didn't show up directly. This proved that the sinister and cunning factor was still deeply rooted in his soul. The original Nesario in history would, of course, bring the Armageddon army to the Dragon Sleep Temple because of his pride and revenge. After all, he was only injured back then, but not dead. But in this life, he was obviously more wary of Duque. That fear was deep in his bones and the deepest part of his soul. Even during the cataclysm, he had only sent a clone to Stormwind City. The last time he had come to the Dragon Slumber Temple to cause trouble, it had also been a clone, and Sinestra had been sacrificed. Duque disappeared without a trace, and the 5 new Dragon Guardians did not show up either. The Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace could not possibly announce to the public that Duque had gone back to steal the Dragon Soul 10,000 years ago, and that the 5 Dragon Kings had retreated to save their strength to cause trouble, right? Looking at it from another angle, with Sleeping Dragon's main force missing, would the cunning and careful Brother Darkwing really dare to charge in? There must be a big question mark here. Before Nesario's main body made a move, they couldn't inject the power of the 5 Dragon Kings into the soul of the giant dragon. The complete version of Giant Dragon Soul was too powerful. It was so powerful that it was like the sun that suddenly appeared in the dark night. It was an existence that could not be concealed by anything or any measure. Once Nesario was scared to the point of hiding, he would send more and more clones out to cause trouble. He could barely hold on for a short period of time, but if the number of clones increased to more than 100, there would always be a lack of defense, and the world would become more and more broken under the constant ravaging of his clones. Nosdormu finally asked, "Then, are we just going to wait like this?" "There's no need to rush. This guy who looks like his main body is very much like his real body. Don't worry, even if Enzos isn't in a hurry, Nesario himself is quite anxious. After all, his body is suffering all the time. From Nesario's main body and clones, it could be seen that his disgusting body that was constantly proliferating and splitting dragon limbs was causing him a lot of pain. Enzos would just be the mastermind behind the scenes, and it didn't matter much to him whether Nesario died or not. Brother Darkwing can't hold on by himself. It seemed like he was hesitating, but it also seemed like he was showing off. In fact, both subjective and objective factors were urging him. In the end, Nesario did not have much of a performance, and he still crashed into the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace. "Ha! My brothers and sisters. You guys don't dare to come out. Do you think that the pitiful protective measures of the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace can protect you and increase your chances of winning? It doesn't matter, I'll go in and drag you out. I'll tear your bodies apart and then freeze them. From today onwards, I'll eat a portion of the 5-colored Dragon King's meat every day for 10,000 years. Ha! The wings of death flapped its wings, paused for a moment, and then immediately accelerated to the limit. When such a behemoth crashed into them at a speed of more than 100 kilometers per hour, the visual shock was indeed unparalleled. Clang! The shield of the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace made a strange sound. It was more like the hum of metal. The scene in his field of vision seemed to be collapsing, and cracks appeared on the white snow like broken glass. That was the collapse of the space protection barrier. With the next blow, Nesario charged into the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace. When the space protection barrier shattered, what appeared in front of Nesario was the true appearance of the first floor of the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace. In the eyes of mortals, the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace was just a slightly more majestic building. The circular body of the tower was about 200 to 300 meters in diameter. In fact, this was wrong. In order to better communicate with mortals, the 5-colored Dragon Guardian used the space protection measure to reduce the activity space of the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace, so that the Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace would appear very small to the eyes of mortals. Just think about it. How could an important building specially provided for the gathering and protection of the dragons be small? Dragons would not casually use the ultimate transformation spell to transform into the size of humans. They preferred to move in their original forms. The diameter of the real Dragon Sleeping Godly Palace alone was more than 5,000 meters, and its height was a full 500 meters. Under that almost endless momentum, mortals would only feel that they were too small when they looked at the huge golden pillars that would require 100 people to hold hands together. Not to mention humans, even the smaller dragon men and half-dragons were easily ignored. Of course, for Nesario, whose body was comparable to a small mountain, the activity space here was still a little small. What greeted him was an incomparably dazzling lightning. Boom! The lightning hammer that seemed to have come from a different world smashed into Neserio's extended chin. The lightning attack that was like a left hook smashed the dragon's iron chin in one go. Crack! There was a strange sound. It was the crisp sound of the lower jaw breaking. Taurym, the guardian, had been accumulating his full strength for a long time. Not only did it directly break Neserio's lower jaw, but even the aftermath of the lightning was instantly transmitted, causing Neserio, who only had half of his body in the first floor of the dragon's sleeping godly palace, to tremble in pain due to the intense electric current. Arg! Neserio let out a scream. This was only the first blow. Taurym's lightning strike was purely launched later but arrived first. The first to pounce was actually the wolf god Goldrin. Goldrin, who had used a divine spell to enlarge his body, was more than 20 meters long. Chapter 1891. Unfortunately, in front of the wings of death, whose main torso was more than 200 meters long, Goldring was still like a small puppy. Goldring flashed past like lightning. He aimed at the relatively small black dragon's neck, and indeed created a rather large wound that was 10 meters long and 3 meters wide. Originally, he thought that he could expand the wound, but unfortunately, the red and green blood that burst out of the wound and the stench alone made Goldring feel that something was wrong, and he immediately retreated. Sure enough, it was extremely corrosive blood. A random lump of blood stained the floor tiles of the temple, and in a few seconds, it corroded a large pit that could sink a buffalo. Hodier, the ice guardian, followed suit. With a precise swing of his axe, he saw the gap in Neserio's source armor and successfully caused damage. However, he was not as agile as Goldring, and the corrosive blood that splattered out directly injured him. Hodier let out 2 screams. The first was from being splashed with dirty blood. The second was from being hit by Neserio's dragon tail counterattack, and his bones were fractured on the spot. His entire left arm was probably crippled. Hodier's 10-story body was sent flying more than 600 meters, and he rolled on the ground 7 or 8 times before coming to a stop. Life Guardian Freya hurriedly used life magic to heal Hodier. The battle continued, and the 4 guards of Alcavan followed suit. At this moment, Neserio's body suddenly began to change shape. One after another, ferocious, long-necked snake heads formed from countless tentacles appeared on his back. Neserio, who was originally in the standard form of a dragon, suddenly turned into a creature similar to a hydra. If it weren't for his huge pair of wings, no one would have thought of him as a dragon. The 100-meter-long snake neck supported 8 mutated snake-shaped heads, which were not inferior to his main body in the slightest. He had a large scarlet mouth, and the shortest teeth were 2 meters long. Coupled with his agile and tyrannical attacks, Neserio still had the upper hand despite being outnumbered. It was clearly the 4 guards who pounced on him at the same time, but because of their body shape, angle, speed, and other factors, what seemed to be a perfect joint attack to outsiders was actually an opening for Neserio. Corellon was the first to be attacked. The Wings of Death first avoided Alcavan with its tail, and used its dragon wings to shake Turawan away. Its main head attacked Amalon, but the 8 snake heads bit at Corellon. The Flame Guardian only had time to block 3 of the heads, but a large piece of flesh was bitten off by the other 5 snake heads. When Corellon screamed and retreated, the 8 snake heads were not greedy at all. They turned around and attacked the guards one by one. Not only did they bite, but the snake heads could also spit out corrosive venom or blazing flames. In one exchange, the 4 guards were all injured and retreated. Nethererio was simply suppressing all the powerhouses and beating them up. This was not a joke. Taurym, Hodier, Freya, the 4 guardians, and a group of gods of the wilderness were all gathered here. The main point was that those who were stronger than Neserio were not as fast as him, and those who were faster than him could not hurt him. Tortoise god Tatara rolled over, only to be sent flying by a tail. His tortoise shell spun on the floor in a ridiculous manner. Tatara himself was dizzy from the spinning. The only ones who could hold on for a while were the Bear Demon brothers. They had both speed and strength and worked well together. At least they could barely hold on under Netherario's 8 snake heads. Even so, their injuries were still accumulating rapidly. If it weren't for the powerful healers like the demigods Cenarius and Freya behind them, they would probably have been defeated in a few rounds. As for the crow goddess Iwina, well, the small dragon heads that emerged from the wings of death opened their mouths and spat out venom that was enough to give Iwina a hard time. While the battle on the first floor of the Wormrest Shrine was fierce, the other ancient dragons were also trying their best to resist the zombie dragons led by Sinestra. Although the combat power of these zombie dragons was not as good as before, their size and destructive power were still there. It would take some effort to get rid of them. On the top floor of the Wormrest Shrine, Alexstrasza was excited and nervous. It's him. It's definitely him. Damn it, isn't Duque back yet? He's back, Nosdormu said in a low voice. This was just a show. The 3 veteran Dragon Kings knew that Duque had returned, and their age was enough to support their acting skills. After confirming the true body of Deathwing, they naturally stopped pretending. A portal suddenly opened at the top floor. Thrall held a golden disc in his hand and strode out of the portal. Where's Duque? The Red Dragon Queen asked curiously. He said to prepare to deal with another strong enemy. Let's start the ritual immediately, Thrall said in a low voice. Another strong enemy? Who else is worthy of the word, strong enemy? Isra was puzzled. Thrall shook his head. I don't know either, but if one of the strongest demigods on this planet, the demigod of the weave, Duke Marcus, is serious, I'm afraid it's a strong enemy in the truest sense of the word. Nosdormu was a little nervous. Obviously, when he peeked into the future, he did not see the image of the strong enemy that Duque had mentioned. The situation had already exceeded his understanding. We can't care about that anymore. Anyway, the agreement was for us to find a chance to start the ritual. Alexstrasza glanced at Onyxia and Thrall. To be safe, we'll all do the essence infusion in human form. Alright. The 5 dragon aspects immediately reached a consensus. Under the guidance of a mysterious force, the gorgeous platinum-colored disc slowly flew about 2 meters above the ground in the air. The 5 dragon aspects stood in 5 different directions in human form, with the standard 5 equal positions. Without further ado, 5 different colored lights emerged from the palms of the 5 dragon aspects and rushed into the platinum-colored disc. The red flame that represented life and purification. The green mist that represented dreams and illusions. The blue light that represented magic and mystery. The bronze stream that represented time and space. The yellow breath that represented the earth and the cornerstone. The 5 different types of powerful energy were injected at the same time, immediately triggering a powerful energy wave. Whether it was the wyvern fighting in the sky, the earth dragon biting and pouncing on the ground, the twilight dragon wantonly killing, or the earth elemental that was silently destroying, everyone subconsciously looked up. On the icy ground that was stained with blood, all the tiny pebbles on the ground began to spin strangely. The broken limbs and living tissues seemed to have regained life and began to tremble. Some of the tiny debris even floated up and flew into the sky, defying the laws of gravity. Nesario, who was fighting fiercely on the first floor of the temple, naturally noticed the abnormality. The air was filled with the destructive power that he was familiar with. He did not panic. Instead, he looked as if he had succeeded. Ha! As expected, Master in Zoth expected. A genius idea. You actually copied the soul of the dragon, but you did not expect that I would also calculate this. Chapter 1892. Nesario's words immediately made the hearts of the 5 dragon aspects at the top of the Dragon Sleep Shrine jump. Nesario was already so fierce, and he still had a backup plan? Even Alexstrasza could not help but glance at her brother, Nosdormu, who was always expressionless, as if she wanted to see something from the face of the Dragon King who never revealed the direction of the future and was in charge of time. Who knew that even Nosdormu himself was shocked. The river of fate must have changed direction greatly. An existence that could be regarded as a trump card by Nesario would definitely be earth-shattering once it appeared. Even Nosdormu himself could not figure out what else could have such an effect. Duque hasn't made a move yet? Onyxia said with absolute certainty. She seemed to be stubborn, but it was more of a firm belief that had been cultivated over a long period of time. Although the initial foundation was just a pitiful relationship between a master and a mount that could be abandoned at any time, as time passed, this belief became more and more unbreakable. Thus, let's just focus on the infusion of energy essence. Alexstrasza shouted, "By the way, can we increase the input power a little? Let's try." The 4 dragon kings nodded in unison. The fierce battle on the first floor of the Dragon Sleep Shrine continued, but more and more dragons turned their attention to the new big whirlpool, because a long, earth-shattering roar announced the appearance of a new boss. There was a pulse from the earth, which was the elemental power from the earth elemental realm. In the sea to the south of the Dragonbone Wilderness, the ancient beach that had once been swallowed by the big whirlpool rose again, and the surrounding seawater that was originally flowing clockwise became turbulent. More elemental fluctuations came, and finally converged on the throne-like stone platform that rose from the bottom of the sea. It was a huge dragon corpse. Just seeing the dragon corpse in the magic mirror made the big shots of the allied forces feel that they could not calm down. Because the dragon corpse had 5 colors: red, blue, green, black, and bronze, which corresponded to the 5-color dragon race. 5 dragon heads, 5 colors, spread all the way to the chest before they were haphazardly pieced together. On the retreating H's Bismarck, Jaina, who saw this scene, let out a scream. The next second she called out again, but this time in a pleasantly surprised voice, "Duque, you're back." That's right, Duque, who had been hiding, stepped out of the portal. "Yes, I'm back." At this moment, more than half of the mages in the world knew about Duque's return. That extremely powerful divine will was connected to the weave, signifying the arrival of the master of the weave. "Everyone, you've worked hard. His Majesty Windrunner and I have returned. Leave the rest to us," Duque announced to the Alliance and even the entire Long Sleep Temple's communication network. This was a reassuring pill that immediately suppressed the wavering morale of the Allied army. "What the hell is that?" Jaina pointed at the colorful dragon carcass that looked like a salted fish on the screen. Duque bared his teeth. He wanted to say the answer, but he realized that it was wrong. He could only smile bitterly. "At least I know that the black dragon head is Nefarian." At this time, there were more than a dozen magic mirrors around Duque, and the big shots of the Alliance who were qualified to attend the throne meeting were listening. When they heard this answer, everyone felt a chill. It was not their fault. Anyone who looked at another race without common sense would have faced blindness. Black dragons all looked the same. Who would have thought that not only did Nesario transform into a dragon of death, but he also caused his wife to die twice and his eldest son to come back to life again? Vashj, who was commanding the battle, shuddered. Then she snapped her fingers with one of her arms, and a female Naga swam over from the side. "That Ratio's corpse from last time. Grind it into powder later. Remember, grind it fine. Then give it to the dwarves in Iron Furnace Castle to forge warhammers or something. I guess they like to produce a batch of standard Black Dragon Prince warhammers," Vashj instructed. In the video brought by the optical telescope and the mage's eye, more energy poured into the colorful corpse that was now beginning to come to life. With every passing moment, everyone felt that the monster was becoming stronger. His other limbs also began to twitch. One by one, the ugly heads were raised. Like the tentacles of a giant sea creature, they moved up and down, looked around, and opened their bloody mouths. All 10 eyes were open, and they were the same color, which contrasted sharply with the rest of his body. Every pair of eyes flashed with a dazzling purple. They were alive, moving, and even talking, but this colorful dragon was broken to the extreme. Bones could be seen in some places. The scales had fallen off, revealing healthy and withered skin. Something seemed to be missing from each head: an ear, an eye that was oozing pus. "Damn it, why do I feel like we're fighting the Lich King's Scourge Legion?" Gavin Rad smiled bitterly. Next to him, Tyrion Fordring slapped the back of his old friend's head. Well, the Lich King was no longer a derogatory term. On the beach, all the mouths of the colorful corpse dragon that stood up opened in unison and let out the same voice. "I am Chromathus, the creation of the great dragon scientist Nefarian." The twilight of the Dragon King that ends all the glory of the Dragon King. Bastards who sit on the highest throne in the Dragonslot Temple. Are you ready to accept your doom? The Twilight Domain on every Twilight Dragon would resonate with this voice in a strange way, allowing the voice to spread far and wide. The voice instantly spread across the entire Dragonbone Waste. On the top floor of the temple, Alexstrasza and the other Dragon Kings were trembling. It was from anger. Of course, they knew about the existence of the colorful dragons. They were monsters stitched together from the parts of the 5 major dragon races. After Duque conquered what used to be Blackwing's nest, he sent an official report to Alexstrasza as the commander of the alliance. The report said that the colorful dragons were all dead. But it was obvious that this strange colorful dragon was a strange existence between the living and the dead. Because Nefarian was definitely dead, but the blue dragon's head next to him should be alive. Alexstrasza recognized him. That guy was Aragos, the son of the former blue dragon king Malygos. On the other side, not to mention Alexstrasza, even Dumuk was dumbfounded when he saw that the blue dragon's dragon head was Aragos. As an old player and a transmigrator, he could not miss the most important storyline in the Cataclysm, the birth of 2 divine artifacts. One of them was the divine artifact staff, Dragon's Wrath, Terragos's soul staff. When he was a player, Duque would definitely be happy to get his hands on this divine artifact staff. After transmigrating, Duque could not do this because the blue dragon girl, Terragosa, was still alive and kicking. If it wasn't for Aragos, Terragosa wouldn't have died. That was the point. Chapter 1893. In the original history, after Malygos, the dragon aspect, was defeated by the other dragons and the heroes of the mortal races for his futile attempt to destroy all magic in the world, the Blue Dragon Legion argued endlessly about the selection of a new leader. They were divided into 2 factions, supporting the 2 most promising heirs, Kalegos, who was committed to peaceful coexistence with the other races, and Aragos, the son of Malygos, who advocated a different path away from this world. In order to end this endless debate, the Blue Dragon Legion decided to hold a ceremony at the embrace of the 2 moons. This is a special astrology in which the 2 moons of Azeroth line up. Legend has it that the Dragon Guardians were given the power to protect Azeroth at this time, to choose a new king of magic, the Blue Dragon Guardian. But the Bronze Dragon Anachronos found an ominous omen in this upcoming ceremony. This dragon who had witnessed endless time had an insight into the evil magical energy fluctuations near the magic pivot, which was the frozen lair of the Blue Dragon Legion in Northrend. With this discovery, he caught a glimpse of the terrible scene of Azeroth succumbing to the flames. Although the connection between this terrible omen and the Blue Dragon Legion was not clear, Anachronos still summoned some creatures that were regarded as short-lived for further investigation. If no hero could accept the challenge to find out the truth, then the destruction of Azeroth that Anachronos had foreseen could become a reality. The heroes of the mortal races found active embers in the Land of Fire, and together with the Sand of Time, they cast the Eye of Eternity. This artifact could be activated on Kadera Island, where the magic pivot was located, and reveal the past that was covered by magic. When the hero came to Kadera, Terragosa appeared. She entered the magic pivot with the hero and used the Eye of Eternity to witness the conspiracy between Aragos and the Blue Dragon Legion's mortal enemy, the fallen Black Dragon King, the Terminator Deathwing. Deathwing promised to ensure the existence of the Blue Dragon clan and Aragos' position after the world was destroyed. And Aragos promised to lead the Blue Dragon Legion to join the Terminator army after becoming the Blue Dragon King. As part of the deal, a branch of the World Tree, Nordrassil, was plucked and infused with powerful magic power. It would be sent to the Land of Fire for a ritual to burn the World Tree. Terragosa, who had witnessed all this, was in disbelief. She sent the heroes back to Nordrassil to inform Kalegos, while she stayed in the magic hub to clean up the traces left by the use of the Eye of Eternity. The mortal heroes who rushed to Nordrassil met Kalegos and retrieved the branch of the World Tree from the Firelands, which had been made into a staff. Having obtained clear evidence, Kalegos went to Caldara and entered the magic hub with Taragosa to question Aragos. But in the process, Aragos, who was prepared, sent the Twilight Dragon to attack them. In order to protect Kalegos, Taragosa sacrificed herself. In order to continue Taragos's existence, Kalegos, who had escaped, used the Staff of the World Tree as a medium and used a magic ritual to bind Taragos's soul and essence to the mortal hero. This unstable magic ritual used the boiling embers of the Land of Fire to extend the effect until the Double Moon Ceremony. During the Double Moon Ceremony, the hero who had transformed into Taragosa participated in the voting for the Dragon King and witnessed Kalegos' coronation as the new King of Magic. After becoming the King of Magic, Kalegos completely bound Taragos's soul to the mortal hero and asked the mortal hero to go to the Land of Fire to retrieve the heart of the Fire Elemental Lord, Ragnaros. After retrieving the heart, Kalegos and a few other adult blue dragons worked together in the main city of the hero to make Taragos's soul permanently reside in the hero's staff. The staff, which was once a branch of the World Tree, was thus upgraded and became a divine artifact. Wrath of the Dragon, Taragos's Staff of Spirit. In addition to possessing powerful magic power, the mortal hero could also transform into Taragos's phantom through this staff. That was the entirety of the original history. Quite a poignant story, wasn't it? In fact, as a player, Duque had always been more than willing to accept divine artifacts and staffs. Even if he had to steal or rob, he would always explore dungeons with the mentality that he had to get his hands on one. Back then, a player named Aguang once said, "I'd rather let someone else ride my horse than let my undead horse be ridden by someone else." His obsession with equipment to this extent was quite exaggerated. However, it also reflected the player's mentality. As a transmigrator, Duque certainly desired divine artifacts. If he had to sacrifice a blue dragon girl in exchange for a divine artifact, Duque would rather not. He still remembered how enchanting the blue dragon girl, Taragosa, was in the form of an elf in the mission. Those long legs, that extremely exotic blue hair, and that extremely aesthetic crooked dragon horn. Although Duque didn't have the chance to peek into this mission in this life, and because of the various changes in fate caused by history, there was no chance for this mission to reappear again. However, it didn't mean that Duque had to kill a girl for the divine artifact. Such a beautiful girl, even if he didn't want to accept her, he couldn't just kill her. If it was written into a novel, killing a girl would mean losing subscriptions. Duque didn't know that because he killed Darkwing once, the result was that Darkwing was far more suspicious and crazy than in history. Originally, as the hero who led the Blue Dragons in the War of the Shifting Sands, Aragos didn't die in the War of the Shifting Sands. He was locked in the Beetle Gate and tortured by Si Thun's men for 1,000 years. In fact, he was already crazy. When Duque killed Si Thun, Aragos was rescued and returned to the Blue Dragons. Although he had the title of Blue Dragon Prince, no one in the Blue Dragons took him seriously anymore. In this life, the Blue Dragon King had nothing to do with him. Alright, Aragos did run to seek refuge with Darkwing, who knew that when Darkwing heard that Aragos wanted to seek refuge, he said on the spot, "Okay, you can contribute to my great cause of destroying the world." Aragos thought that he only needed to carry bricks at most. In the end, Nisario, the pitch-black coal boss, told him directly, "A tall building needs a strong foundation, so you can be the foundation." Aragos became the foundation. He was directly chopped into a dragon rod, his limbs and wings were cut off, and stuffed into Chromatus' body. It couldn't be helped. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its own children, but when Darkwing went crazy, he would even smash his wife and children. His wife had died twice and lived twice, and his son had stuffed Nefarian into the five-colored dragon to be the dragon head, let alone a guy who was suspected to be a spy sent by Dumuk. Chapter 1894. After all, Duque was already sharpening his knife to find a traitor. Whether it was a traitor or a traitor, he would just kill the traitor. Wasn't the reason why the strongest fortress in history was breached because of internal strife? Duque had already helped Isra clean up a traitor during the recent rebellion of Fandral Staghelm. He definitely wouldn't mind doing it again. In any case, in this life, Syndagosa and Malygos had rebelled, and Duke definitely didn't mind Arygos rebelling as well. The most important thing was for their family to be neat and tidy. He didn't expect that God's plans would always go awry. Seeing that Arygos was in the 5-colored dragon Chromatus, Duke laughed like a pig on the spot. Duke was just curious. Why did Nefarian get himself into trouble? Why didn't he call this guy the colorful fish pill version of Nefarian? Why did he have to call him Chromatus according to history? After all, Chromatus had never appeared in the game. He was just a guy that existed in novels. He didn't expect the goddess of fortune to be so malicious and really let him escape. This was really... Duque didn't know where to start. Speaking of which, the general was the courage of the soldiers. In fact, when the 5-colored dragon Chromatus appeared, everyone was really scared out of their wits. But there were so many people in the command center, and they all watched their boss laugh like a pig. It was funny, but they all became calm again. So, you know this thing? Or did you already know how to deal with it? Queen Sylvana walked up and put her slender fingers on Duque's shoulder. Behind Queen Sylvana were Aurelia and Sasha. After settling the 2 battles, they had the mages open a portal and come over. The 3 Windrunner sisters could almost be called the 3 sisters of the Wind God. They were the right choice to fight a dragon. Seeing the eager women of the Windrunner family, Duque was a little annoyed. Most of his women were extremely powerful. Fortunately, there was a cute girl like Kalia and a silly girl like Hoof. Otherwise, life would be hard. Duque waved his hand. Focus on Deathwing. After harmonizing the power of Galacrond, Nisario is a big problem. Was there really no need to care about this Chromatus? If I'm not mistaken, it should be a combination of the 5 types of power of the 5-colored dragon. It has no weakness. Jaina pointed at the 5-colored dragon in the magic mirror. Invulnerable Meridian? Duque chuckled. Just now, I received confirmation from Alexstrasza. Apart from Nefarian and Arygos, the other 3 dragon heads belonged to 3 ancient dragons. The first one to die was Tesla, who died in the ancient war 10,000 years ago, but his body was missing. The smart Jaina immediately understood. Are you saying that they're not evenly matched? The difference was too great. Nefarian was undoubtedly one of the strongest demigod W's. But Arygos was more than 1 gear off, and the other 3 dragon heads were 3 gears off. It would be fine if Nefarian was the leader and the other 4 were the assistants. Unfortunately, the leader didn't want to learn and chose to learn something similar to the soul of the dragon, hoping that this haphazardly assembled dragon body could produce the same effect as the soul of the dragon. Duque sneered. All right, everyone, I'll take the lead with the Black Edge Knights and take care of Chromatus. Then it's your turn. Everyone, get ready. The Black Edge Knights? What did this battle have to do with the Black Edge Knights? No one thought that the Death Knights could play any role in this battle against the Earth Elemental Army. At this moment, the thousands of Death Knights of the Black Edge Knights were already in position. They were in a special destroyer, Eldritch. Regardless of whether this special flying destroyer really had the theoretical invisibility ability like Duque had boasted. High Lord Darian Mograine was now under a lot of pressure. As the leader, he was stunned by the old man beside him, who did not belong to his knights, but was dressed like a Death Knight. Not only him, but all the members of the Black Edge Knights felt a strong sense of oppression on the soul level. It was as if they could not help but kneel and worship him as long as he had a thought. Sorry, Darian, I'm still not used to the control of this power. I've tried my best to suppress the leakage of soul energy, the old man said. No, it's okay. This is also a good training for us brothers. Uncle. After thinking for a long time, Darian finally called the old man uncle. Oh, it's a long time no see. The old man patted Darian's shoulder. It was a friendly gesture, but Darian felt like a grandson. What could he do? The old man was the boss. On the other side, Duque appeared. There was a loud noise in the sky, and the big boss appeared. South of the Wormwrist Shrine, in the vast sky, 4 huge phantoms suddenly appeared. They were the Wind God Throne, the Land of Fire, the Tidal Throne, and Otter. The phantoms representing the three elemental realms spread out elemental energy channels in a way visible to the naked eye. They connected with the arcane energy channels extended by Otter in the air, and finally formed a huge arcane rune circle that floated behind Duque. Duque was using this method to tell the world that he was a demigod of the weave. Chromatus, no, the black dragon in the middle, raised his head high. The moment he roared, the old man from the Alliance of Heroes recognized that it was Nefarian's voice. Duke Marcus, you were just a little mortal back then. An existence like a vermin. Do you think you can do whatever you want after mastering the power of the three elemental realms? The anger in the roar filled the entire world. Duke smiled and twirled the in his hand. He said, I'm sorry. With enough power, you can really do whatever you want. Of course, there's no point in giving power to trash like you. Back then, you could be overturned by a group of mortals. But he was a very cool word. It could perfectly express how disdainful and arrogant the person who said it was. He was worth a book of 10,000 words. Nefarian was speechless for a moment. Immediately after, the chromatus that he formed became furious. The four dragon heads were raised high, and they used different words to trash talk at Duque. Nefarian, on the other hand, could not take it anymore. Stop arguing. Just use that to get rid of Duke Marcus. If he dares to leave, just destroy the Wormwrist Shrine. Chapter 1895. Roar. Along with the roar of the five-colored dragon, the atmosphere, the seawater, and even the gravel under the five-colored dragon's body all trembled. Mysterious powers of different characteristics gathered from all directions and converged on Chromatus' body. Around him, due to the conflict of elements, the pebbles in his field of vision began to spin and tremble strangely in midair. These pebbles had different performances. Some of them blossomed and grew plant roots. Some of them instantly became extremely old, while the other half of the pebbles were smooth as if they had been polished. Some of them flew and drew out illusory bands of light, dazzling and blurry. Some even turned into mysterious runes, turning into distorted runestones that were out of scale. One did not have to deliberately study to know that this performance was the embodiment of the five powers of the five-colored dragon. The air was filled with a scent that the five-colored dragon was familiar with. Whether it was suspicion or disbelief, Chromatus was indeed using the power of one dragon to do what the five dragon aspects were doing. Duque, we owe you another favor. Hurry up and kill that ugly guy. The gathering of the dragon's soul has been seriously disrupted by him. Alexstrasza sent an urgent message in a flustered and exasperated manner. Duque was speechless. He realized that he had really underestimated the intelligence of Nesario and Enzos. He had never thought that Chromatus' ultimate move would have such an effect. It could actually affect the injection of the essence of the dragon's soul through resonance. Duque's facial muscles twitched. Good. You have the biggest breasts, so you have the final say. What big breasts? The Red Dragon Queen was stunned. A slip of the tongue. Although Duque teased her, his hands did not stop moving. His entrance came with its own background music and background images. This was not used to show off. Although there were many elements of showing off, more importantly, his ultimate move was faster than Chromatus's ultimate move. Perhaps Chromatus would definitely be the top among demigods in terms of individual combat power. At the end of the day, there was a difference between a demigod who became a demigod with a physical body and a standard demigod who had a world as their foundation. In terms of the convenience of gathering the power of the world, 10 Chromatus couldn't compare to 1 Duque, not to mention the fact that Duque had used the weave in advance in the Dragon's Rest Temple. Even the Dragon's Rest Temple had opened up a mana port for Duque. Pharaoh, who had already finished setting up his base, was acting like a hooligan. In this land, Duque was no different from the Pharaoh who had his own wizard tower. The violet of arcane magic, the snow white of ice, and the crimson of fire. When these three colors perfectly blended into a mysterious color that even the naked eye could not describe, the entire sky suddenly flashed with a dazzling brilliance. A gust of wind blew, spurring these three types of energy to accelerate their ejection. It was a roar different from the sound of cannons. The light of destruction formed by the convergence of the three major elements and arcane energy turned into a huge beam of light that split the sky and the earth. Like a huge spear that pierced through the sky, it ruthlessly pierced towards Chromatus, who was on the reef in the center of the sea. The energy spear directly penetrated the group of twilight dragons that were foolishly driven to the center line between the two, projecting the light of death on the ancient beach. The shining radiance of the elements connected with the light in the sky. Even from 100 miles away, one could clearly see the radiance that illuminated the sky and imagine the trembling of the earth there. If Deity was facing an ordinary enemy, then this attack would be enough to send him back to his hometown to play with his eggs. However, that was just a preemptive strike. The supreme biochemical product that could use all the attributes of the Chromatus dragons was not so easy to deal with. A huge magic circle spread out under Chromatus's huge body, almost covering the entire beach. Unbeknownst to him, there were already thousands of twilight believers in robes and hoods surrounding Chromatus. The sound of the incantation resounded between heaven and earth, and the air resonated with it. Dazzling pillars of light pierced through the formation and flew into the air, drawing arcs in the air before finally converging on Chromatus' body. The 5 dragon heads faced Deity's direction at the same time and breathed out dragon breaths at the same time. The 5-colored dragon breaths converged near the dragon's mouth, condensing into a terrifying shockwave that was no less bright than Deity's. It easily crossed the distance of thousands of meters, like a spear of light, and accurately collided with Deity's light cannon. On one side, there were ice, fire, arcane, and air elements. On the other side, there were life, time, dreams, earth, and arcane elements. The light cannons of both sides were so dazzling and exaggerated, and the turbulence of energy during the collision was so violent and epic. Every mage and warlock watching this scene through the magic mirror went crazy with joy. They could not suppress the joy and shock in their hearts. Was this the ultimate showdown between elemental magic and mysterious power? Was this the power of Deity, who was at the top of the throne of magic, and the pentashade dragon, who was at the peak of biochemical modification? Perhaps, even after 10,000 years, they might not have the chance to witness such a breathtaking battle again. They marveled at Deity's astounding control, and also marveled at the earth-shattering power of the 5-colored dragons. In this short but intense confrontation, Deity ran into trouble. "Master, the weave can't hold on much longer." Karthika shouted through the spiritual connection. Deity bared his teeth. Once upon a time, the magic net was solid enough as a transit and gathering point for guiding power from the elemental realm. Unfortunately, the weave was Deity's creation. It was incomparable to the elemental realm that had been around for thousands of years. It was not that the elements in the elements realm had been exhausted. Instead, it was his masterpiece that couldn't stand it anymore. This was awkward. Deity sighed in his heart, then sent a magic message. "Old friend, it's up to you." An indifferent voice came from the other end of the message. Then, a 1,000mm cannon opened fire. It was not a tungsten core armor-piercing shell, but a human cannon. It blasted out a fellow dressed in heavy black armor, dressed like a death knight. None of the members of the Destruction Army took this missile seriously. The cannonballs of the Alliance were indeed powerful and could turn many twilight dragons into dogs. However, this was limited to adult dragons that were below the level of ancient dragons. At the level of the ancient WMs, the hardness and toughness of their scales, as well as the magic resistance of their bodies, were not something that could be penetrated by ordinary attacks. Unexpectedly, the cannon did not explode after landing. It only smashed out a huge crater. No one cared. A voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell sounded from the bottom of the crater. "Life is life. Death is death. You are a monster that transcends the boundaries of the living and the dead. Your existence has always been a mistake. In the name of the holy light, no, in the name of the King of the Dead, I order you to return to nothingness." Chapter 1896. If he had the time, Duque would not mind sparring with a strong enemy like Chromatus. Unfortunately, Duque did not have the time, because when Chromatus appeared, Wings of Death on the first floor of the Wormrest Shrine went into action. His huge size gave him a great advantage in hand-to-hand combat. Moreover, he was a dragon of death, and other than soul attacks that involved the origin, no matter where he was attacked, it would not be fatal. If he was just an empty shell, the Guardians would not mind tearing him apart like scrap metal. Unfortunately, the powerful regenerative ability kept repairing his body. Although every powerhouse knew that such a high-speed regenerative body could not last for too long, no one could do anything to him before that long time was completely over. Wings of Death went on a rampage on the first floor. After he saw an opportunity, he sent the Bear brothers Usoc and User flying, and did whatever he wanted. The first person Nesario went after was Cenarius. There were only 2 strong healers in the allied army. Freya was a 10-story tall giant, and Cenarius was the weakest. In front of a 200-meter-long dragon tail, his 4 legs were short legs. With a sweep, Cenarius' 3 legs were directly broken, and he became a noob. He did not die, but he lost the ability to move for a while. Archavon desperately blocked Wings of Death's next attack, and Goldrin rushed over, bit Noob's butt, and dragged him to the side hall of the shrine. At least there was a protective spell formation there, and it could last longer. It was common sense to kill the healer first in a group fight, and Wings of Death used this trick to the fullest. After knocking Turawan away with his claws, Wings of Death decisively gave Freya a dragon wing slap, and half of the female guardian's face was crooked. He did not linger at all, and took Torim's lightning strike head-on, and rushed to the second floor of the Wormrest Shrine. The space on the second floor was not as big as the first floor, and it was only about half the space. This was better for Wings of Death's size. The space was too small, and his huge body could not move. The space was too big, and those annoying flies had a place to hide. Once on the second floor, the smaller god of the wilderness did not dare to go up. Otherwise, what about the divine meat sauce? It was precisely the Guardian's request for help that made Duque have no choice but to act shamelessly. The one who tricked Chromatus was Uther, the Lich King who should have left history a long time ago but had become the Lich King in this world. He did not seem to have done anything. He just raised his small arm and clenched it against Chromatus' chest like the Death Knight's signature, Death's Grasp. A faint black light pierced into the chest of the multicolored dragon. The light was so plain and unadorned that the Twilight believers who were close to it could not even detect anything special about it. Some of the Twilight believers even sneered at the man who looked like a Death Knight. But what happened to Chromatus in the next second almost drove the Twilight believers crazy. Because Chromatus' entire dragon body was in trouble. This 5-colored dragon should be perfect. Back then, after Enzos picked up the last of his neck and head, Nefarian was forced to work by Enzos and Nesario. The Black Dragon Prince, who was left with only a nearly annihilated soul and a dragon's neck and head, did not have the heart to die at all. With the greatest enthusiasm and the most earnest attitude, he at last produced this supreme masterpiece of his, Chromartus, which contained himself. This was a biochemical monster created after countless experiments and thousands of years of research. In order to avoid the excessive load caused by the energy conflict and the collapse of the dragon body that Chromatus put together, Nefarian also obtained the method of making the dragon soul from his father and modified a magic circle so that the power of the 5-colored dragon could be fused outside the body and blasted out. This was the perfect form of existence for the 5-colored dragon. As long as the output power of the 5 dragon heads was controlled and the power of the dragon breath was uniform, there would be no problem. In theory, this was true. But Nefarian would never have thought that there was a Lich King in this world who specialized in dealing with the dead, and he was in the Alliance. Back then, after Arthas killed the blue dragon Saffron, he turned him into a frost dragon under his control. He also controlled many dragons of death, including the queen of the blue dragon Syndagosa. This showed the Lich King's control over the dead. As a paladin with the strongest willpower, Uther did not surrender even when he was absorbed by Frostmourne. In a sense, In this world where spiritual power was power, Uther's upper limit as a Lich King was likely to be higher than Arthas's. This was something that could not be known at this stage. But with him making a move, Nefarian immediately felt that something was wrong. Originally, through the stitching of the dragon bodies and the soul fusion, the souls of the 5 dragons were combined into one, and their thoughts were synchronized. Who knew that at this critical moment of the ultimate move, it would suddenly collapse again? Nefarian instinctively wanted to use his own willpower to fight against the huge spiritual pressure. He failed. Just like a subdragon at the lower end of the food chain, a pure-blooded dragon at the top of the food chain had a natural fear. He could not resist the pressure from the mysterious man at all. This man was his king. He ruled his body and his soul. Every word of this man fell into his mind like an imperial edict that could not be resisted. Maybe when he had stronger soul power, he could fight against this mysterious king of the dead. Maybe his father could do it. But not him, Nefarian. Oh, no! Nefarian let out a final scream. Chromatus's soul collapsed, and naturally, the light cannon released by the 5-colored dragon could not be maintained. The bystanders only saw that Dumuk's gorgeous ultimate move finally overturned Chromatus's 5-colored cannon. But no one could see the role that Lich King Uther played in this. Actually, Duque did not mind letting Uther make a grand entrance and clear his name. But Uther was firmly against it. Dumuk could only be thick-skinned and keep the achievement of killing the 5-colored dragon with one strike. Everyone watched in shock as the elemental light beam pierced through the black dragon's head and finally entered the huge body that was mixed with 5 different colors. The other 4 heads howled in pain and raised their necks. Their entire bodies stood up from the wet rocks on the ancient beach and fell backward. Chapter 1897. The scene was very chaotic, and it was a mess everywhere. In the airspace and ground surrounding the Dragonsleep Temple and the ancient beach, the main battlefield was naturally Duque versus Chromatus. There was chaos all around. On this side, there were the pentashade dragons of the Dragonsleep Temple, as well as the dragon men and draconians. There were also various dinosaurs and drakes, as well as the long-range bombardment from the Alliance's flying battleships. In the sea, there were also many Naga and Murloc troops who risked being sucked into the Great Whirlpool. On the other side, there were mainly Twilight dragons and Twilight believers riding Twilight dragons. On the ground, there were a large number of earth elemental creatures, biochemical bone dragons, and various mutant monsters. They fought in the sky, on the ground, and in the sea. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, and elements collapsed. Almost no one would notice that a guy who looked like a Death Knight turned out to be a Lich King, an existence that theoretically did not exist. Perhaps the most sharp-eyed powerhouses would notice that it was often the higher-ups of the Alliance. In any case, a large group of onlookers who were not of much help to the main battle only saw that Duque had used a terrifying move that combined the power of the 3 realms to instantly kill the enemy's seemingly very strong boss. In this day and age, those who could attack on a large scale were all abnormal. Those who could have abnormal destructive power were definitely big bosses. This point of view was definitely correct. Their own big boss, Duque, had instantly killed the opponent's big boss. When else would they shout 666? For a moment, the entire Alliance army was seething. Oh, boss is mighty. Long live Duke Marcus. Long live the Alliance. Not to mention the mortals on the distant battleships, the highly intelligent pentashade dragons, and even the dinosaurs and other drakes with average intelligence instinctively roared at the sky and roared. Roar, 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 roar. The roar was long and filled with savagery. Many ancient dragons could not help but recall the battle from 10,000 years ago. It was the same fight against evil, and it was the same gathering of all races. The feeling of working together was great. At this moment, Alexstrasza, who was on the top floor of the Dragonsleep Temple, was both surprised and happy. She was happy that Duque had instantly killed the Destruction Army's backup, Chromatus. Speaking of which, Nesario also had 8 snakeheads, but Alexstrasza did not care about that kind of single-attribute snakehead. After all, No matter how strong they were only strong in physical attacks. There were many ways to deal with them. However, she really did not know how to deal with Chromatus, who could gather all 5 elements and cause a mixed reaction just like Giant Dragon Soul. She imagined that if it were the 5 dragon aspects, they would probably suffer a crushing defeat. He really didn't know how Duque defeated that monster with just 1 light cannon. At this time, she did not notice that her sister Isra's eyes were shining with a strange light. What surprised him was that Nesario was actually so powerful. There were faint signs of him breaking through all the way here. Oder had 3 guardians, and several gods of the wilderness. This kind of strength was definitely too powerful in the world. Unfortunately, he was no match for Nesario, who used his size and regenerative abilities to act like a hooligan. This was a situation where one person could defeat 10 people with great strength. When the opponent's body was too big, normal attacks were obviously not powerful enough. She wanted to speed up the infusion of energy into Colossal Dragon's Soul, but she couldn't. How much water a bucket can hold depends on the shortest piece of wood. Onyxia had actually worked very hard. Compared to her previous sloppy self, she was many times better. The Red Dragon Queen could completely imagine how much effort Duque had put in, and even paid a high price that she didn't know, to make this female black dragon, who didn't even seem to care about the destruction of the world, work hard. Unfortunately, some talent and some hurdles could not be overcome by hard work. That was inheritance. When dragons gave birth to children, they would unknowingly imprint the way they used their power into the dragon's egg. That was the inheritance of the wisdom and power of the previous generation. Or when imparting skills, these elements would be engraved into the children's souls in the form of soul imprints. Although Malygos was a little crazy, he had done enough to pass on the Blue Dragon clan's inheritance. However, when Nesario forcefully pushed Sinestra and the other female dragons, he had already gone crazy and completely abandoned the power of the Earth Guardian. This caused this power to lose its inheritance. Unless Onyxia found another way to use the power of the Earth on her own, she would never be able to reach the height that Nesario had when he was an Earth Guardian dragon. For example, if the new king of magic, Kalegos, had 80% of the previous Blue Dragon king, then Onyxia would only have 70%. As a basic output of power infusion, she was qualified, and her performance was still surplus. However, in a situation where time was getting tight, she would become a fatal shortcoming if 100% of power and essence was really needed. Compared to her, Kalegos' talent seemed to be activated, and his use of magical elements was becoming more flexible and smooth. It seemed that Kalegos could be improved to at least 90%. Alexstrasza could only be anxious. At this moment, Sal, who had been standing at the side and being stared at by several ancient dragon guards, said, "Your Majesty Onyxia doesn't seem to have a thorough understanding of the earth. If you don't mind, I hope to help the Black Dragon Queen." Alexstrasza still had some spare time. She turned to look at Sal. "Sal, do you think I can trust you?" It was not Firebird, but the majesty of the queen had a kind of power to interrogate the soul. As the shaman of salvation, Sal naturally had a clear conscience. He looked at the Red Dragon Queen's fiery red eyes with a clear and fiery gaze. "My soul is trustworthy. Even if your Majesty Alexstrasza doesn't trust me, you should at least trust His Excellency Duke Marcus who sent me here." Sal sighed in his heart. This was the sorrow of having a relationship with the Dragon Sleep Temple too late. Back then, the Dragonmaw clan's enslavement of the Red Dragon Queen and even the Red Dragon Army made it difficult for the tribe to have a good relationship with the Red Dragon clan. It could be said that finding a starting point was too slow. Sal had no choice but to use Duque's name. At least Duque had asked Sal to send the soul of the dragon over. Arranging for him to send such an important thing proved that Duque trusted him. Unexpectedly, Onyxia also chimed in. "Duke said that you can trust Thrall, but don't trust the tribe so easily." Sal bared his teeth on the spot. He wanted to refute, but he found that what Duque said made sense. Even he himself felt that his moral integrity was above the credibility of the entire tribe. Look at that bastard Gurus. He destroyed all the terms of cooperation with the Alliance and started a war everywhere like crazy. Sal sighed. Alright, you help. Alexstrasza finally agreed. Chapter 1898. Originally, it was already difficult enough for the 5 dragon aspects to harmonize their powers. Everyone was very worried that Thrall would cause trouble if he interfered. Thrall was very careful and meticulous. He did not affect Onyxia's dominance of the power of the earth at all. He was more like a tinker, gently collecting the power that Onyxia had missed out on due to her impatience. He slowly straightened them out and channeled them into the dragon soul. This works. The input of the 5 guardian powers increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. 71%, 75%, 82%, 90%. When it reached 90%, it was awkward. Now it was Kalego's turn to be unable to keep up. At this moment, Alexstrasza suddenly received a request to enter. Duque. Alexstrasza, have my servant, Khadgar, fill in the missing part of the spell, Duke said through the magic transmission. Are you sure? The queen was shocked. Of course, what Kalegos lacks is not power, but the use of power. Khadgar is the core of my magic net. I can synchronize my soul with Khadgar, but I can't send a clone to the scene. After all, I still have to help you stop Nesario. The performance of the mortal was so dazzling that it was blinding. First, it was Thrall who harmonized Onyxia's power, increasing the efficiency of the essence infusion. Now, Duque actually got a servant to help and even guaranteed it. Alexstrasza's face turned red. She looked at Isra, Nozdormu, and the other veteran dragon kings. Okay. Khadgar, who was dressed in a magic robe, stepped out of the portal and walked over. He gently placed his hand on Kalego's arm. A brand new Titan rune magic circle was forming behind Kalegos and Khadgar. The magical energy that had become unstable when it reached 90% power a moment ago suddenly stabilized at a speed visible to the naked eye. This time, it was Kalegos' turn to blush. He suddenly realized that Khadgar's understanding and use of the Titan runes was actually above his. That meant that Duque's level was higher than his, the current king of magic. That was quite shameful. Kalegos was bad at fighting, but he was at least a good comrade who was dedicated to protecting the world. With a purer temperament, he quickly calmed down and increased the power of the energy injection. 92%, 96%, 100%. He could finally pour in all his energy. Duque, give us 10 more minutes. No, 5 minutes is enough. Alexstrasza knew that the more time they had, the more stable the situation would be. But she really couldn't bear to put all the pressure on Duque's shoulders. This was irresponsible to their allies, as well as shaming the Dragon Slumber God Palace. She also discovered that with the addition of Khadgar and Sar, the magic and earth domains had become more stable. If Kalegos and Onyxia's draconic bodies could withstand it, she could try to inject them with around 120% of the power. This was an overload. If the situation fell into a dangerous situation, she would have to do this. At this time, the middle hall of the Dragon Slumber Shrine had already been smashed into smithereens. The smaller the space, the stronger the strengthened Brother Darkwing. Haha. Deathwing sprinted at high speed. Even though he was gliding at a low altitude close to the surface of the hall, it caused chaos in the surroundings. The smaller god of the wilderness had to dodge desperately, but the 4 guardians who had grown in size couldn't keep up with Brother Darkwing's agile movements. This allowed Nesario to often gain an overwhelming advantage in certain areas. This time, he grabbed the Frost Guardian Hodier with one claw and completely ignored the cold air coming from the other party. Then, he slammed Hodier into the wall of the temple like a club. While he smashed the other party into a daze, a few knuckles of his left front claw were broken. It didn't matter. The frozen limbs would collapse on their own later. Anyway, they could just regenerate. He didn't have a chance to finish off Hodier completely because he was a large giant who was hot on his heels. As soon as he leaped into the air, Deathwing made a 180-degree turn in the air that did not match his huge body size. The next second, he catapulted like a cannonball towards the guardian of life, Freya. Deathwing couldn't forget to finish off this female giant. Unfortunately, before he could touch Freya, he had to suffer a rather painful thunderbolt from Thorim. The right side of his dragon head was charred black, and even half of his spheroid metal chin was charred. He didn't care. In midair, he did a standard S-shaped snake maneuver, allowing him to avoid the two big, stupid bear demigods. This time, he aimed at the wolf god Goldring. Goldring was indeed very fast. He could use his dexterity in midair to step on the air wall and even use the wind pressure to change directions to escape. But that didn't change the fact that he was just a small wolf that was only a few meters long. When Nesario saw the opportunity, he turned around and gave an earth-shattering flap of his dragon wings. Goldring finally fell for it. Howl! The snow-white wolf silhouette with a hint of blue flew far away like a home run. At this moment, Nesario's dragon tail, which was close to his body, was suddenly hit by a hammer. A blazing hammer. It was as if a tornado was swirling up a violent flame. That kind of terrifying heat that seemed to be able to burn everything in the world was no stranger to Nesario. In his recent memory, he still remembered that he had experienced it himself. He turned his snake-like neck in bewilderment and looked behind him. Logger. Duque? Deathwing's dragon eyes widened in disbelief. Not to mention that he didn't believe it, many of the gods of the wilderness who had participated in the war in the Land of Fire subconsciously assumed a defensive posture. If one only looked at the scene from afar, anyone would think that the guy who appeared out of thin air in the middle of the Wormwrist shrine, with a flaming lower body, an inverted triangular upper body, and a pair of huge, thick, flaming arms holding a huge Balrog hammer, was the former fire demon king Ragnaros. Unfortunately, the place where Sir Lager's head was supposed to be was replaced by something else. The irascible horned head and lava skull face was gone, and in its place was a throne made of flames. Who else could it be but Duke Marcus, who was watching the show with his legs crossed and one hand holding his chin? Yo! Duque raised his palm and looked like he was swearing. Sorry. It's the Duke Marcus who plotted to kill you in Lordaeron back then. If Deathwing's lungs were still used for breathing, he would most likely explode in anger on the spot. He did not care about the life and death of Ragnaros and El'Ikir. These two elemental lords were originally used by Zoth to assist him in causing trouble, so it didn't matter if they died. What he cared about was that the other party actually used the bodies of his subordinates to deal with him. Next, another enlarged replica of Al-Akir appeared. Of course, his head was replaced with Sylvanas. What do you think of our elemental body? Chapter 1899. If Nesario's face could be black, it would be as black as the bottom of a pot. Unfortunately, he was AF** King Black Dragon himself. Had anyone ever seen a black dragon with a gigolo face in the form of a dragon? Normally speaking, the larger the size of a giant, the greater the burden. Under the influence of gravity, it was already a heavy burden to support a body that was more than 10 stories high, not to mention the nutrients that a creature needed to consume every day. For a dragon at the top of the food chain, the amount of meat that a dragon needed to eat every day was calculated in tons. Fortunately, dragons had the special trait of hibernation to reduce consumption. Otherwise, wouldn't tens of thousands of dragon mouths have eaten all the beasts in Northrend? In a sense, when it came to size, elemental creatures were cheating. As long as there was enough mental strength to control more elements, elemental creatures could theoretically make their bodies infinitely large. Just like the 4 guardians of Alkavon who could become large, they were not pure giants, but special semi-elemental life forms. It was just that the flexibility of their bones and skin determined the upper limit of their bodies. Pure elemental creatures did not have this restriction. When Duque and Queen Sylvanas appeared in the form of a 300-meter-tall elemental god, many guardians and wilderness demigods felt that they had let the adulterous couple off too easily. Now that these two fellows had become the elemental kings, they were really amazing. Nesario had sent 2 elemental lords to cause trouble, but now it seemed that he was more than just stupid. It was like giving a knife to them to slash themselves with. What was the difference between that and lifting a rock to smash one's penis? Ragnaros? Here. You two idiots. Even if Nesario had a good temper, he could not stand it. Besides, the Black Dragon King had always been very vengeful. Oh, your two former allies, if there are still ghosts left, they will cry. Duque's lips curled into a mocking smile. With a thought, the headless logger under Duque suddenly waved the huge Balrog hammer and smashed it at Nesario. This Balrog hammer was the genuine Sabra's Balrog Ragnaros hand from back then. After Magni Bronzebeard became a demigod and became a diamond man, it was transferred to his second brother, Muradin. When Duque asked to borrow it, Muradin did not hesitate to throw it to Duque. Therefore, the power of his own Balrog god with the real Balrog hammer was, of course, extraordinary. Attack! My Lager Mk2-. Duque's loud roar spread throughout the Wyrmrest shrine. Duque was very pleased. Men of this era all dreamed of driving a Gundam when they were young. Although he did not know which idiot said that grown men should love Zagu, Duke did not care. I want to be the only one in the world. In the Gundam Gund 3s. In the Gundam of Azul. Duke didn't like things that emitted green flames all over their bodies. The Alliance's technology wasn't that advanced either. He had to use his black technology talent to barely bring some things up to the level of World War II. The true fire elemental lord was the master of the hand of the Balrog. In fact, it would be a real waste to give this hammer to Magni. Duque knew that Magni would eventually return, but before that, he would use it first. The dazzling flames that burst forth from the Balrog hammer flashed with blazing light spots similar to the eruption of the sun. The crow god Avienna, who was flying nearby, was so frightened that her crow feathers almost fell to the ground. These were not solar spots. They were simply clusters of highly concentrated fire elements. These fireballs that were condensed to the extremes spun in mid-air, and then converged into one. From Duque's mouth came a cold voice that did not match the surging sea of fire. Where the Balrog hammer points is purgatory. A blazing shadow that seemed to span the heavens and the earth swept across Neltharion's large dragon body that was so exaggerated that it occupied the entire field of vision of the powerhouses. Deathwing suddenly let out a shrill scream, and the huge left wing that seemed to be able to cover a small town was broken in two. From the point of the break, all the broken limbs instantly turned into countless exploding fireballs, and slowly fell from mid-air. One blow blew up the wing. This was only because Neltharion's reaction was fast enough and smart enough to dodge at the last moment. Otherwise, it would have been his dragon head that was blown up. Even so, everyone still saw the hope of victory. The biggest problem with being unable to do anything to Deathwing previously was his overly strong defense and regenerative ability. In the face of the absolute destructive power created by the giant elemental god that Duque controlled, Brother Deathwing's regenerative ability was a joke. His wings indeed began to regenerate the moment they were destroyed. How could it be so easy to regrow limbs from burnt scars? The highly concentrated flames of the Balrog hammer were not something that could be bought with a single hammer. Even after the Balrog hammer had left Darkwing's body, it still inflicted continuous damage to it due to its terrifying burnout property. The powerhouses with sharp eyes could see that dragon-like limbs were constantly growing out of Deathwing's wounds, and most of them were burnt by the flames that had yet to be extinguished. The attack power was greater than the opponent's regenerative speed, and this was the real damage. At this time, Duque frowned. He found that the output of his giant god of flames, Lager, was a little insufficient. It was not his fault, but the Wyrmrest Shrine's fault. Alexstrasza and Onyxia helped him open the Wyrmrest Shrine's elemental port, but the problem was that the Wyrmrest Shrine was a standard Titan creation, and the total amount of a single element that could be transmitted into the shrine per unit of time was strictly limited. Fortunately, he had a partner by his side. Attack! Windrunner! Queen Sylvie raised her bow, and the headless Al-Ikir under her rushed forward. In fact, it was not necessary to make the giant elemental god look like Lager or Al-Ikir. The elemental creatures had such a body shape, which was related to their elemental characteristics. After hundreds of millions of years of biological evolution and natural elimination, it was basically determined that there were only a few body shapes that were more suitable. Moreover, he had just beaten up the other party not long ago, so he had a particularly deep impression of it, and it was easy to imitate. The Windrunner rushed forward, and with a wave of her hand, a large wind blade was released. The sharp air blade cut into Deathwing's right wing as if it was butter, and the result was astonishing. The initial cut was very smooth, and it felt like it was going to be cut in half. When it reached the middle of the wing, it could be clearly seen that the latter half of the wing began to change color. This was clearly the Deathwing changing its body structure, changing its elemental resistance. Unwilling to give up, Queen Sylvie immediately ordered the headless Ikir to add another lightning strike. The rumbling lightning strike looked full of visual violence and beauty, but those who knew the ropes would know that it was useless. The charred black caused by the lightning strike did not spread, and the damage was the size of a basketball court. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.